Welcome to True Crime for Sleeping, where we gently unravel haunting true crime stories in a calm, thoughtful tone. If you're joining us tonight, we invite you to settle in, get comfortable, and let the story unfold slowly. If you enjoy stories like this, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and comment below where in the world you're listening from. Your support helps us continue creating peaceful, in-depth true crime content. Now, let's begin. The town of Delmont, Iowa, wasn't the kind of place that made headlines. With a population of just over 1,200, the town sat quietly along a stretch of Highway 18, mostly unnoticed by those who passed through. There were no skyscrapers or shopping malls, just modest homes with weathered porches, two diners that closed by 8 p.m., and a small public library that doubled as the community center. Neighbors knew one another by name, and most people left their doors unlocked. It was, as many described it, the kind of town where nothing bad ever happens, until someone vanished. In the early morning hours of November 10th, 2014, Claire Whitmore didn't show up for work. She was a fourth-grade teacher at the only elementary school in town, known for her gentle voice, warm smile, and unwavering patience. Claire had taught in Delmont for almost 8 years. She lived alone in a small two-bedroom home, just 4 blocks from the school, tended a garden in the summer, and volunteered at the library every other Saturday. Her life was quiet, rhythmic, and from the outside, entirely unremarkable. So when she failed to arrive for morning class without calling ahead, something completely out of character, her co-teacher Pam Estes grew immediately concerned. She called Claire's phone. No answer. She called again, still nothing. After 20 minutes passed, Pam contacted the school principal, who in turn called the sheriff. Sheriff Tom Givens responded personally. He'd known Claire since she was a teenager, back when she still went by Claire Peterson. He remembered her as a shy, observant girl, with a love for animals and a habit of writing poetry in the margins of her notebooks. She wasn't the kind of person to go off the grid. He drove straight to her house. The morning was cold, the sky overcast. Frost clung to the grass. Claire's grey Ford Focus was parked neatly in the driveway. Her front door was locked. Nothing appeared out of place. Givens knocked, then circled the property. No sign of forced entry, no broken windows, no note. He called for backup and entered the home through a back window left slightly ajar. Inside, everything was pristine. A cup of tea sat cold on the kitchen counter. Her coat was still on the hook. Her phone charger was plugged in beside her nightstand, but the phone itself was missing. There were no signs of a struggle. It was as if she had simply vanished. The initial search effort was swift and thorough. Volunteers, dogs, and drones covered the surrounding fields, riverbanks, and wooded trails. Flyers were posted in every grocery store and gas station within a 30-mile radius. Claire's face, soft framed by dark hair and calm eyes, appeared on the local news that evening, with a plea for information. The town came together in a way that only small towns can. Prayer circles formed at the local church. Teachers from the school delivered meals to Claire's family, who had driven down from Minneapolis. Candlelight vigils were held outside her home, the glow of each flickering flame reflected in the windows she no longer looked out from. Days passed, then weeks, and still no answers. By early December, the FBI had been brought in, not because they suspected foul play from the beginning, but because Claire's disappearance bore none of the signs of a voluntary absence. No financial activity, no digital footprint, no travel bookings, no withdrawals from her bank account. She had simply ceased to exist. That absence, so complete, so quiet, felt unnerving. Then came the discovery that changed everything. In mid-December, a hunter found a burned-out sedan down an old access road about 15 miles north of town. The car was badly charred, nearly unrecognizable, but the VIN was still readable. It matched Claire's Ford Focus. Inside were few clues. No body, no blood, but tucked in the back seat was a scorched scrap of fabric later identified as part of the cardigan Claire had last been seen wearing. To the authorities, this was no longer a missing persons case. Someone had wanted her gone, and someone had tried to erase every trace. As the investigation deepened, it became clear that Claire Whitmore had been hiding truths that, while not criminal, painted a very different portrait of her life in Delmont. First came the revelation of a strained relationship with a former fiancé, Thomas Lane, who had moved to Colorado 2 years prior, after their engagement ended abruptly. They had dated for 5 years. By all accounts, the breakup had been painful. Claire had never spoken about it publicly. Then came the discovery that she had filed a formal complaint against a fellow teacher at the school just 6 months before her disappearance. The details were sealed, but quiet conversations around town hinted at a possible harassment claim, something Claire had confided only to a friend in the next town over. The third and most shocking revelation came from a former student. A now teenage girl told investigators that in the weeks leading up to Claire's disappearance, she had seen her teacher meeting secretly with a man in a blue pickup truck near the edge of town. The girl didn't know his name, but described him as tall, wearing a flannel coat and a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. When the police combed through traffic camera footage, they found nothing. The roads Claire reportedly used had no surveillance. The case grew colder still. By the beginning of the new year, with the snow heavy on the roofs and the trees stripped bare, the official narrative became painfully quiet. There were no more press conferences, no new tips, no arrests, but Delmont had changed. The air felt heavier, trust ran thinner. Parents who once let their children walk to school now drove them the short distance. People whispered in grocery store aisles, speculating about who might have known more than they let on. The house Claire had lived in was eventually sold. Her family packed up her belongings, piece by piece, with tears and quiet reverence. Her classroom was reassigned, her books shelved away, and yet, her absence was everywhere. In the playground where she once supervised recess, in the library where she had volunteered, in the dog-eared lesson plans that bore her handwriting in the margins, and in the question that would not go away: who would want to harm Claire Whitmore, and why? The town of Delmont settled uneasily into the long winter of 2015. Snow muffled the streets and fields, and the days felt shorter, darker and colder without Claire's steady presence. At the elementary school, the teachers did their best to fill the void she left behind, but the absence of her gentle voice in the classroom was a palpable loss. Detective Rachel Jensen had taken over the case from Sheriff Givens. Though Givens had deep roots in Delmont, it was Rachel's job to bring fresh eyes and expertise. She was known for her patience and methodical approach, qualities she hoped would help unravel the mystery that had become an unspoken ache in the community. The burned car found in December was the first real physical clue, but it had yielded frustratingly little. Forensic experts had combed through the remains, looking for any trace of DNA or fingerprints, but the fire had destroyed almost everything. The discovery of the scorched cardigan fabric was chilling proof that the car belonged to Claire, but there were still no signs of her. Rachel spent hours poring over records, from school complaints to Claire's social media activity, trying to piece together the life the teacher had led in the months before her disappearance. It was during one of these late nights at the station that she stumbled upon an unexpected detail: a series of encrypted emails in Claire's work account. The emails were brief, containing coded language and unusual references that didn't fit the warm, straightforward woman Claire's colleagues described. With the help of a cybersecurity expert, Rachel decrypted the messages. They revealed a secret correspondence between Claire and an anonymous sender who went by the name Orion. The content was cryptic but suggestive of fear and a desperate need for help. One email read, "I thought I could handle it alone, but the shadows are growing. If anything happens to me, please make sure someone knows the truth behind the smile." Another, "The safe place isn't so safe anymore. I'm watching my back, but I'm not sure who's behind me." Rachel shared this with the FBI team, who launched a search for any leads on Orion, but no one could identify the sender. The emails stopped 2 days before Claire vanished. The new lead cast a fresh light on the case. Claire had been hiding something or someone dangerous. Rachel decided to revisit Claire's home with fresh eyes. This time she brought a forensic team to comb through every inch of the property for overlooked clues. They found a hidden compartment beneath the floorboards in Claire's bedroom. Inside was a small stack of notebooks, each meticulously detailed with dates, observations, and reflections. The notebooks revealed a portrait of a woman caught in a web of secrets. They documented Claire's growing suspicion that someone at the school was watching her, interfering in her life. She wrote about odd phone calls late at night, silence on the other end, or sometimes just heavy breathing. Notes about her car being tampered with, small but unsettling signs of intrusion. In one entry from early October, she wrote, "I don't know who to trust anymore. Thomas's name keeps coming up in my thoughts. I wonder if he's involved in this, or if it's someone else entirely." Thomas Lane, the ex-fiancé who had moved away, had always been a point of speculation, but no one had concrete evidence linking him to any wrongdoing. Rachel arranged to interview him again, this time with the weight of the notebooks behind her. Thomas was living in a small town in Colorado, working in construction. When Rachel called, he sounded tired but cooperative. "I was shocked when I heard Claire disappeared," he said quietly. "We had a rough ending, sure, but I never wished her harm." He explained that their breakup had been difficult, marked by long silences and unspoken resentments, but he had no involvement in her disappearance. "I hadn't spoken to her in months before she vanished," he insisted. "I didn't even know about these threats she mentioned until I read the reports." Rachel sensed sincerity in his voice, but also a lingering sadness. "Did you ever feel like someone was watching you or Claire?" she asked. "No," he said, "not really. But after the breakup, I got a few strange calls. Nobody spoke, just heavy breathing. I thought maybe it was a prank." When Rachel asked if Claire had ever mentioned fearing for her life, Thomas's voice dropped to a whisper. She was scared of something big, but she never said what. Back in Delmont, Rachel returned to the school to speak with colleagues and students. Among the teachers, there was a quiet wariness. Many spoke of Claire's kindness and professionalism, but also admitted that she had grown withdrawn in the months before her disappearance. Pam Estes, the co-teacher who first noticed Claire's absence, told Rachel about a particular incident. "One day Claire came into the staff lounge looking shaken," Pam recalled. "She said she had found strange messages in her mailbox, notes that didn't make sense, threatening in tone. She didn't want to show them to anyone." Pam paused. It felt like she was carrying something terrible on her shoulders. The school's principal confirmed that there had been a formal complaint filed by Claire 6 months before she disappeared, an allegation against another staff member, though the details remained confidential due to privacy laws. Rachel's interviews slowly painted a picture of a workplace rife with tension and secrecy. Among the staff was a janitor named Paul Reynolds, a quiet man in his late 50s, who had worked at the school for decades. When Rachel spoke to him, he was reluctant but eventually opened up. "There was trouble," he said carefully. "Things that didn't make sense. Some people wanted to keep quiet, keep the peace. But Claire, she wanted answers." Paul hinted at a network of gossip and intimidation, staff members who were unwilling to speak out, afraid of what might happen if they did. Rachel asked if Paul had seen Claire meet anyone suspicious near the school. He thought for a moment. "There was a man, tall, wore a baseball cap low. I never caught his face, but he came around a lot, asking questions." The description matched the sighting reported by the student. Meanwhile, forensic analysis of the burned car was revisited, this time with advances in DNA technology. Samples were sent to a specialized lab, and weeks later, the results came back. 2 unidentified DNA profiles were found. Neither matched Claire's or any known associates. This confirmed Rachel's suspicion that someone else had been involved. Days stretched into months. Rachel found herself poring over the notebooks, the emails, the interviews, and the emerging evidence, trying to connect dots that refused to line up neatly. She reached out to a psychologist specializing in trauma and stalking cases, to better understand Claire's mindset. The expert explained that victims often experience an overwhelming sense of isolation and helplessness, which can deepen when the threat comes from someone within their trusted circle. Claire's writings showed classic signs of hypervigilance, the constant scanning for danger, the exhaustion from fear. The psychologist said, "In many cases, the abuser is someone the victim knows well, which makes the betrayal all the more devastating." One night, as Rachel sat in her office with the notebook open before her, she felt the weight of the unanswered questions pressing down. Who was Orion? Who had burned the car? And why had they not left Claire's body? Had she escaped? Or was her fate sealed somewhere deep in the woods, beyond reach? The search for Claire Whitmore was no longer just about finding a missing woman. It had become a search for truth, trust, and the hidden fractures in a community that had once believed itself immune. The first snow of 2015 had melted into a cold, muddy thaw when the town of Delmont tried, and failed, to reclaim its quiet normalcy. The absence of Claire Whitmore had seeped into the fabric of daily life, becoming a constant shadow that no one could quite explain or shake. Detective Rachel Jensen felt the weight of the case growing heavier with each passing day. The fragmented clues, the burned car, the encrypted emails, the mysterious Orion, the threatening notes formed a puzzle whose edges refused to meet. Yet the people in this small town, while fearful and uncertain, were still willing to share what they knew, and sometimes what they suspected. One afternoon in February, Rachel received an unexpected call from a woman named Evelyn Harper. Evelyn was a librarian at the Delmont Public Library, the place Claire had volunteered every other Saturday. She was in her late 60s, with silver hair pulled back neatly and eyes that held decades of quiet observation. "I think I might have something you need to see," Evelyn said, her voice trembling slightly but resolute. Rachel met her at the library that same day. Evelyn brought a small, unassuming envelope, yellowed with age, which she handed over carefully. "I found these behind the radiator last month while cleaning. I'm not sure why they were there, but they belonged to Claire." Inside were several handwritten letters, carefully folded and worn. The paper was thin, the ink faded in places. Rachel sat down and began reading. The letters were addressed to Claire, but none were signed. They spoke in tones that shifted from affectionate to threatening, from pleading to ominous. The writer warned Claire to stay silent, to stop asking questions, or else face consequences. One letter referenced a secret that would ruin everything, and another ended with a chilling phrase, "Some truths are better left buried." The discovery of these letters was unsettling. It suggested Claire had been receiving threats for some time, and the sender had taken great pains to conceal their identity. Rachel asked Evelyn if she remembered seeing anyone suspicious around the library during Claire's visits. "Not exactly," Evelyn replied, "but Claire did seem distracted lately. She would sometimes glance over her shoulder, like she expected someone to be watching." The investigation took a new turn when Rachel received a tip from a local truck stop about a man fitting the description seen by the student, a tall figure in a flannel coat and baseball cap, who had been spotted several times near Delmont in the weeks before Claire's disappearance. Using the limited surveillance footage available, Rachel pieced together movements around the town's outskirts. A pattern emerged. The man appeared near the school, the library, and Claire's home at different times, always watching, never approaching openly. Rachel cross-checked the descriptions with known offenders and those with histories of stalking or harassment, but came up empty. This elusive figure became the ghost in the case, the ever-present watcher. Meanwhile, Claire's family struggled with their own unanswered questions. Her mother, Susan Whitmore, spoke to Rachel in a quiet, broken voice during a visit to the Whitmore family. "Claire was always so careful," Susan said, folding her hands tightly. "She didn't have enemies, at least not anyone she'd tell me about." Susan described the days after Claire vanished as a blur of frantic calls, worry and heartache. She spoke of the painstaking process of going through Claire's belongings, the notebooks, the emails, and now the letters. "It's like she was trying to protect someone, or maybe herself, from something dangerous," Susan said. Rachel could feel the raw pain in her voice, a mother's desperate need for closure. One of the more perplexing aspects of the case was the lack of a body. While the burned car and other evidence suggested foul play, no remains had ever been found. This absence left room for difficult possibilities. Claire could have escaped, or she might have been taken somewhere inaccessible, or worst of all, disposed of so carefully that no trace remained. Rachel revisited the wooded area where the car was discovered. The snow was gone now, replaced by the muddy, thick earth of early spring. She walked the trails, feeling the eerie silence that blanketed the place. She thought about the clues, the missing phone, the letters, the encrypted emails, and how they painted a portrait of a woman increasingly aware of an unseen threat. Claire had been fighting to hold on to her life, her dignity, and her truth. At the school,
Tension simmered beneath the surface. The staff, once close-knit, had grown fractured. Rumors circulated about who might have been involved in Claire's disappearance, but no one dared to speak openly. Rachel met again with Pam Estes, who shared her own quiet fears. "We all wanted to believe it was an accident, or that Claire had run off," Pam said. "But deep down, I think we knew something darker was at work." Pam revealed that Claire had confided in her about the stress she'd been under, but never about specifics. She was afraid, Pam whispered, afraid of what might happen if she spoke out. Rachel's inquiry into the school complaint uncovered something troubling. The teacher Claire had accused was a man named Gregory Mills, who had been suspended but never formally charged due to lack of evidence. Gregory was known to be difficult, arrogant, prone to outbursts and disliked by many, but nothing concrete had connected him to Claire's disappearance. Rachel interviewed him at his home on the edge of town. Gregory denied any involvement. "I had my issues with Claire, sure," he said, arms crossed, "but I never hurt her. If I wanted to, I could have made her life miserable in ways no one would suspect, but I didn't." When Rachel pressed on, Gregory's face tightened. "There are things about that school, about that town, that people don't want uncovered." Rachel realized that the case was less about a single act, and more about a web of secrets, fear and betrayal. Claire Whitmore was caught in a silent battle between those who wanted to keep the town's skeletons locked away, and the truth that threatened to expose them. The more Rachel dug, the clearer it became that the story was bigger than one missing woman. In early March, a breakthrough came unexpectedly. A local hunter reported finding a shallow grave in a remote part of the nearby forest, about 20 miles from Delmont. The area had recently been disturbed, and the earth was soft. Rachel and her team rushed to the site. What they found was a collection of personal items: Claire's wedding ring, a scarf matching the fabric found in the burned car, and a small leather-bound notebook from her collection. No body was recovered, but the items confirmed that Claire had been in this secluded spot. This discovery reignited the investigation, fueling hope that Claire's story might be uncovered, that answers might come. Yet with each new piece of evidence, the mystery deepened. Who had buried the items? Had they intended for Claire's disappearance to remain hidden forever? Or was this a deliberate message, an invitation to follow a dangerous trail? Rachel knew one thing: the shadows Claire had feared were real, and they stretched wide. The psychological toll on the town was profound. Families retreated behind closed doors. Children's laughter was softer. Conversations avoided certain topics. Delmont became a town haunted not only by what had happened, but by what might still be lurking just beyond sight. Rachel's days blurred into nights filled with endless questions. She often found herself reading Claire's notebooks, her words echoing in the quiet of the interrogation room. One passage stood out: "Sometimes I wonder if the truth is worth the cost, if telling it means losing everything, but silence feels like dying." Claire had chosen her silence, and now, Rachel was left to speak for her. Spring had settled fully over Delmont, the icy grip of winter slowly loosening as buds began to swell on the trees, and the days grew longer. Yet despite the changing seasons, the cold silence that surrounded Claire Whitmore's disappearance remained unbroken. The town's restless undercurrent of grief and suspicion pulsed quietly beneath the surface, a reminder of the fragile line between hope and despair. Detective Rachel Jensen sat alone in the dim light of her office, staring at the file that had consumed the past months of her life. Claire's case was unlike any other she had encountered, not simply because of the mystery it posed, but because of the profound human cost embedded in every piece of evidence. There was no clear resolution, no neat closure waiting at the end of the trail. Instead there were fragments, letters, burned fabric, a hidden notebook, a shallow grave with belongings but no body, that together whispered a story of fear, isolation and betrayal. The discovery of Claire's personal items in the forest grave deepened the sense that her disappearance was not random. Someone had tried to erase her, but had left behind breadcrumbs, perhaps intentionally, perhaps by mistake. Rachel returned to the woods with a small team of forensic specialists, determined to search the surrounding area meticulously. They combed through the underbrush, examined the soil, and mapped the terrain, hoping to uncover more clues. The work was slow and painstaking, with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves filling the air. One afternoon, a volunteer with the search party unearthed a partially buried cell phone case, cracked and weathered by time. Inside was a damaged phone, waterlogged but not entirely destroyed. Forensic technicians worked carefully to recover any data, clinging to the hope that the device might hold secrets about Claire's final days. Meanwhile, back in Delmont, the town's mood remained heavy. The community had rallied around Claire's family in the early days after her disappearance, but as weeks turned into months, a quiet resignation settled in. Neighbors whispered in hushed tones about who might be responsible, trading rumors that sometimes felt as damaging as the crime itself. The suspicion fractured friendships and left an imprint of mistrust. At the local church, a vigil was held each month in Claire's honor. Candles flickered gently in the cold night, faces illuminated with tears and prayers. The congregation gathered, not only to remember Claire, but to hold on to a shared sense of hope that she might still be found. Her mother, Susan, spoke at one of these vigils, her voice fragile but steady. Claire was more than a teacher, she said softly. She was a light in our lives. I believe she's still out there, waiting to come home. Rachel found herself reflecting on those words often. What had Claire been waiting for? Rescue, redemption, or simply the truth? Despite the heartbreak, Rachel's commitment to the case never wavered. She continued to interview anyone who might have known Claire, or noticed something unusual. New details emerged slowly: an overheard argument, a suspicious visitor at the school, a late-night phone call. One breakthrough came from an unexpected source: a teenage boy named Michael, who attended the same school as Claire taught at. Michael was quiet, thoughtful, and often kept to himself, but he had a keen eye. I didn't tell anyone before, he said nervously during an interview, but I saw something the night Claire disappeared. I saw a man near the woods. He wasn't from around here. I think he was watching the school. Michael's description matched the mysterious figure Rachel had been chasing since the beginning, the man in the baseball cap and flannel coat. With Michael's testimony, Rachel was able to focus the investigation on a possible suspect, a transient man named Jacob Fisk, who had recently been arrested in a nearby county for unrelated charges. Jacob was known to have a history of violence and erratic behavior. While Jacob's connection to Claire was tenuous, Rachel felt it was worth pursuing. She obtained a warrant to search his property, and found items that suggested he had been near Delmont during the critical period. There were maps, photos of the school, and personal effects matching the description of the man seen by witnesses. Jacob was brought in for questioning. In the sterile interrogation room, Jacob was defiant, refusing to answer many questions, yet his behavior betrayed flashes of agitation when Claire's name was mentioned. Rachel watched him carefully, noting the tension in his hands, the way his eyes darted around the room. Where were you on the night Claire disappeared? She asked quietly. Jacob sneered. I don't have to tell you anything, but if you did, Rachel pressed gently, you might help a family find closure. Jacob's expression flickered. For a moment something resembling regret crossed his face. I saw her, he admitted finally. She was scared. She was trying to get away. He refused to say more. Rachel pushed for more information, but Jacob remained largely silent, and without concrete evidence, the case stalled once again. The legal system's limitations felt painfully real. Claire's family was left suspended in uncertainty, neither knowing the truth nor able to move forward. In the months that followed, Rachel focused on the small but significant acts that might keep Claire's memory alive. She coordinated with the school to establish a scholarship in Claire's name, aimed at supporting students who showed compassion and courage, qualities Claire had embodied. The community rallied, raising funds and sharing stories about the woman they had lost. For Rachel, this was perhaps the most hopeful part of the case, the idea that from pain and mystery, something positive could grow. Yet the unanswered questions lingered like a persistent fog. Who had sent the threatening letters? Why had Claire feared Orion? Was Jacob Fisk truly involved, or merely a ghost in the background? The notebooks, The emails, the burned car, all pieces of a larger, darker puzzle that perhaps no one in Delmont would ever fully solve.
On a quiet evening, Rachel stood at the edge of the woods, looking out across the sprawling landscape that had swallowed Claire's footsteps. She thought of Claire, her bravery, her kindness, and her quiet strength in the face of fear. The case would always be open, the search ongoing in one form or another. But for now, Rachel allowed herself a moment of stillness, honoring the woman whose life had changed a small town forever. Claire Whitmore's disappearance was not just a mystery of where or why. It was a story about the fractures within a community, the invisible battles people fight in silence, and the ways in which loss ripples outward, touching lives in unexpected ways. As Delmont moved forward, carrying the weight of the unknown, Claire's story remained a haunting reminder of the delicate balance between light and shadow. And in that balance, hope flickered, fragile but enduring. The small town of Marlow, nestled in the rolling hills of southern Ohio, had long been a place where everyone knew one another. Streets were lined with familiar faces, porches where neighbors waved from rocking chairs, and the slow hum of life that felt timeless. It was the kind of town where people trusted their doors left unlocked and the children played freely until the sun dipped low. But in the summer of 1997, that trust was shattered by the disappearance of 17-year-old Emily Carter. Emily was a bright, kind-hearted high school senior with dreams of becoming a teacher. Her laugh was easy and genuine, and she was beloved by friends and family alike. She worked part-time at the local diner and was known for her volunteer work at the animal shelter. Emily was the kind of girl who made Marlow shine a little brighter. On the evening of June 12th, Emily left her home after dinner, planning to meet a group of friends at the town park for a late summer bonfire. She never arrived. That night, the heat of the day lingered, thick and still in the air. Emily's mother, Grace Carter, waited anxiously. She knew Emily was usually punctual and would have called if she was running late. Hours passed with no sign. When the clock edged past midnight, Grace called Emily's best friend, Lisa, who confirmed Emily had left for the park but had not been seen since. Panic rippled through the community. By morning, a search party had formed. Flashlights swept through wooded trails, volunteers called out Emily's name into the darkness, and police began their official investigation. Detective Samuel Rhodes was assigned to the case. A man in his early 40s with years of experience in missing persons, he approached the investigation with steady resolve and quiet empathy. He understood the heartbreak that came with uncertainty and the pressure to find answers quickly. As the days unfolded, details emerged that painted a complicated picture of Emily's last hours. Witnesses at the park remembered seeing her laughing and talking with friends around the fire, but after a brief moment, she had stepped away alone, saying she needed some air. No one saw her again. The area was combed repeatedly, but there was no trace, no footprints leading away, no signs of struggle, no discarded belongings. The question that haunted everyone was, where had Emily gone? Investigators turned their attention to Emily's social circle. Friends described her as thoughtful and sometimes quietly burdened, but no one mentioned anything unusual or troubling that night. There were no known enemies or conflicts that might explain a sudden disappearance. Her boyfriend, a young man named Jason Mills, was cooperative but visibly shaken. He said they had plans for the summer and insisted he had no idea where she could be. Yet, under the surface, Detective Rhodes sensed something unspoken, a tension, perhaps fear, that no one wanted to admit. Days stretched into weeks. The community's hope began to waver. Emily's parents placed flyers around town and contacted local media. The town held vigils, their faces illuminated by candlelight, prayers whispered into the cool night air. Despite the mounting sorrow, the case remained frustratingly elusive. One morning, 2 weeks after Emily vanished, a hiker found a discarded shoe on a narrow trail several miles from the park. It was Emily's. The discovery reignited the search, bringing renewed energy and urgency. Detective Rhodes and his team expanded their efforts into the dense forests that surrounded Marlow, hoping the shoe was a clue rather than a sign of something worse. A breakthrough came when a local man reported seeing a suspicious vehicle near the trail on the night Emily disappeared.
The car, a faded blue sedan, had driven slowly past the area multiple times. Though no license plate was recorded, this lead focused the investigation on a transient man named Mark Turner, known in neighboring counties for minor offenses and strange behavior. Mark had a history of mental health struggles and was known to hitchhike along the highways near Marlow. Detective Rhodes tracked down Mark, who was living in a rundown camper outside a nearby town. During questioning, Mark was evasive but did not outright deny being near the park. He looked scared, Rhodes recalled. But there was something else, a flicker of something dangerous beneath the surface. Despite no physical evidence linking Mark to Emily's disappearance, suspicion hung over him like a cloud. Meanwhile, the town of Marlow grappled with its growing fears. Parents kept children close, conversations avoided the night Emily vanished, and the carefree summer days faded into quiet anxiety. Grace Carter's hope remained unbroken, but the pain etched deep lines across her face. "I just want to know where she is," she said softly. "To hold her again." As summer bled into fall, the case took on a life of its own, a tale whispered in hushed tones, full of questions that had no answers. And in the shadows of those unanswered questions lay the chilling reminder that sometimes, even in the safest places, darkness can quietly take root. The days after the discovery of Emily's shoe became a turning point in the investigation. Detective Samuel Rhodes and his team expanded their search area deep into the tangled woods that blanketed the hills outside Marlow. Volunteers combed through every inch of the forest floor, but the dense underbrush, fallen branches and thick shadows seemed to swallow every trace of the missing girl. The search was exhausting and painstaking. Teams moved slowly, scanning the ground for anything out of place, a scrap of clothing, a footprint, a piece of jewelry. But each time, hope was met with silence. Meanwhile, back in town, the atmosphere was heavy. The bright energy of summer had dulled into a somber vigilance. Parents spoke in low voices about the dangers that had lurked unnoticed until now. Children were kept indoors after dark, and the usual rhythms of life felt fragile. Grace Carter remained a constant presence at the police station, sitting quietly as officers worked to follow every lead. Her eyes were weary but determined. "Emily's out there," she said often. "I just know it." One chilly afternoon, a call came in from a farmer who had been working near an old abandoned quarry a few miles from Marlow. He had found a small notebook partially buried in the dirt, the pages weathered and torn but still legible. Detective Rhodes was quick to arrive. The notebook belonged to Emily. Her handwriting was neat but hurried. The entries revealed fragments of her inner world, thoughts, fears, dreams, and a growing sense of unease. There were mentions of a person she referred to only as C. Emily wrote about feeling watched, about strange phone calls late at night, and encounters that made her skin crawl. She never named C directly, but the fear was clear. Reading those pages, Rhodes felt the weight of a story unfolding beneath the surface, one of trust betrayed and silence kept out of fear. The investigation turned again, focusing on this shadowy figure, C. Officers searched for anyone in Emily's life who fit the profile, someone who might have had access to her, who could move through the town unnoticed. It was a delicate balance. They had to consider people close to Emily, friends, acquaintances, neighbors, but also strangers who might have crossed her path. At school, whispers circulated about a new substitute teacher who had come to Marlow earlier that spring. He was a quiet man named Carl Hayes, recently divorced and with a past that wasn't fully known. Though his demeanor was unassuming, rumors hinted that some students felt uncomfortable around him. Detective Rhodes requested a meeting with Carl. The man arrived at the police station wearing a worn jacket, eyes cautious but composed. "I understand you knew Emily Carter." Rhodes began gently. Carl nodded. "She was one of my students. A good girl, bright, kind." Rhodes probed carefully, asking about their interactions, any unusual behavior Emily might have shown, or any tensions at school. Carl spoke calmly, but there was a flicker of defensiveness when pressed. "I was never inappropriate," he said firmly. "I was there to teach, nothing else." Yet, a search of Carl's apartment revealed something unsettling. Among his belongings, officers found a journal filled with detailed observations of students, notes on their appearances, habits, and even personal information. Some pages were marked with dates that coincided with Emily's disappearance. Though no direct evidence linked him to her vanishing, the discovery raised red flags. Meanwhile, the community's pulse quickened as news of the investigation spread. Parents demanded answers, and the local media hounded officials for updates. Grace Carter grew more withdrawn, her nights restless with worry. She clung to hope but feared the truth might be darker than she dared imagine. In quiet moments, she would sit on the porch of their small home, staring out into the distance where the woods stretched endlessly, wondering what had happened to her daughter. One morning, as autumn leaves drifted in the cool breeze, a call came from a local hiker who had found a hidden clearing deep in the forest. There, beneath a cluster of fallen branches, was a small piece of fabric. It was the same pattern as a scarf Emily had often worn. Detective Rhodes felt the familiar ache of hope and despair mingling in his chest. He sent a team to investigate further. The clearing revealed signs of recent disturbance, broken twigs, footprints in the soft earth, and faint tire tracks nearby. This discovery was the first real break in weeks. With renewed determination, Rhodes's team focused on the tire tracks. They were traced back to an old pickup truck registered to a man named Gerald Jerry Whitman, a local mechanic with a history of run-ins with the law. Jerry was known for a short temper and a suspicious reputation, though no one suspected him of anything as serious as a disappearance. When questioned, Jerry denied any involvement with Emily or the events that night. "I don't know anything," he said gruffly. "I was working late at the shop." But further investigation revealed inconsistencies in his alibi. Detective Rhodes pushed harder. A neighbor came forward, recalling that Jerry had been seen arguing loudly with a young woman matching Emily's description a few days before she disappeared. There was a pattern emerging: tension, fear, and silence. Police obtained warrants to search Jerry's property. In his garage, they found hidden compartments containing clothing that might have belonged to Emily, and tools that could be used to restrain someone. The evidence mounted against Jerry, but without Emily or a body, the case remained incomplete. Jerry was arrested on charges of kidnapping and assault, but he vehemently denied harming Emily. "I didn't take her," he shouted during his arraignment. "I didn't hurt that girl." Throughout the trial, the community watched with a mix of fear and hope. Emily's family attended every hearing, their faces a portrait of resilience, despite the crushing uncertainty. The courtroom was filled with testimonies from friends, neighbors, and experts who described the emotional toll of the case. The defense argued the evidence was circumstantial, emphasizing the lack of a body and direct proof. But the prosecution painted a picture of a young woman silenced by fear and violence. Outside the courtroom, Grace stood with quiet dignity. "I just want to know what happened to my daughter," she said softly. "I want her to come home." The trial concluded with Jerry Whitman found guilty of kidnapping and unlawful imprisonment, though the charges of murder could not be proven. He was sentenced to 25 years in prison. The verdict was bittersweet. Justice in some form had been served, but Emily remained missing, a ghost lingering on the edges of the town's collective heart. Detective Rhodes continued to work the case long after the trial. He followed leads, re-examined old evidence, and spoke with anyone who might hold a clue. Though years passed, Emily's story remained alive in his mind, a reminder of the fragile line between light and darkness. In the quiet moments, Rhodes reflected on the profound impact of the disappearance. Emily was more than a missing person. She was a daughter, a friend, a beacon of hope for those who knew her. Her absence rippled through the community, changing it in ways no one could undo. As winter settled over Marlow, the search for answers continued in the hearts of those who loved her. Emily's story was a haunting reminder of the mysteries that linger just beyond reach, and of the enduring strength of hope in the face of loss. The cold of winter settled over Marlow, like a heavy quilt, muffling sounds and bending branches beneath the weight of frost. The forest, once alive with summer's symphony, now lay silent and still, its secrets hidden beneath a blanket of snow and shadow. Yet even in this quiet, the search for Emily Carter did not cease. Detective Samuel Rhodes sat in his modest office at the Marlow Police Department, the dim light of a desk lamp illuminating stacks of files and photographs spread before him. A cup of coffee, long grown cold, rested near his elbow, forgotten in the hours of contemplation. On the wall hung a faded picture of Emily, her bright eyes, gentle smile, a reminder that behind every file number was a living, breathing girl, missing and unseen. Despite the conviction and imprisonment of Jerry Whitman, the unresolved nature of Emily's disappearance haunted Rhodes. The lack of a body, the absence of closure, gnawed at him. The community had been given a verdict, but to Rhodes, the case remained open. He could not accept that justice was truly served without answers to the deepest question: what had happened to Emily Carter? At home, Grace Carter wrestled with a loneliness that no season could ease. Her days were a cycle of quiet routine and restless waiting. The rooms that had once echoed with laughter now stood cold, the emptiness a stark contrast to the vibrant life that had filled them. Grace kept Emily's belongings carefully preserved: a jacket folded neatly, a stack of schoolbooks, the now worn scarf found in the forest. Each item was a tether to the past, a fragile thread connecting her to the daughter she longed to see again. In the evenings, she would light a single candle and sit by the window, gazing out into the darkness, willing some sign, some whisper, to reach her. The community's support was steady, but no words or embraces could fill the void. "I hold on to hope," she said one afternoon to a local reporter, "not because I'm sure, but because I have no choice." As the months passed, new information surfaced, small and fragmented like pieces of a shattered mirror. An anonymous letter arrived at the police station, its writer claiming to have seen a figure dragging a bundle near the edge of the woods the night Emily disappeared. Though the letter was vague, it rekindled the investigation. Detective Rhodes ordered a fresh sweep of the area, deploying cadaver dogs and forensic teams. The dogs picked up a scent that led to a shallow grave, hastily covered beneath a tangle of leaves and branches, but the soil revealed only decayed animal remains, a cruel reminder of nature's indifference. Still, the hope that Emily might be found alive persisted. The police followed leads that wound through nearby towns and cities, sightings of a young woman fitting Emily's description, strangers asking for directions late at night, faint traces on the edges of memory. Each tip was chased with the same dedication, though most ended in disappointment. One afternoon, Detective Rhodes received a call from a woman named Helen Parks, a retired nurse living several counties away. Helen spoke softly but with certainty, recounting a chance encounter with a girl who looked frightened and wary. The girl had arrived at Helen's doorstep, asking for help but quickly withdrawing when Helen reached out. She described the girl's eyes, wide alert, carrying the weight of hidden terror. Though Helen had no proof that the girl was Emily, the description struck a chord. Rhodes arranged for a discreet visit, hoping to uncover new clues. When officers arrived at Helen's home, the girl was gone, but Helen's account gave the investigation new urgency, suggesting Emily might still be alive, perhaps trapped somewhere, hidden behind walls of fear and silence. Back in Marlow, the town grappled with the slow erosion of hope and the creeping suspicion that something darker might have taken root. Neighbors looked at one another with unease, whispers of secrets and shadowy figures threading through conversations. At school, students struggled to focus, the absence of their classmate a constant presence. Teachers spoke carefully of safety and trust, trying to hold the fragile fabric of community together. Detective Rhodes began to explore a different avenue, the psychology of abduction and captivity. He consulted experts, who spoke of victims living in fear, adapting to their circumstances, sometimes unable to reach out for help. The idea that Emily might be alive, yet trapped, fueled the investigation with renewed purpose. Meanwhile, in the cold solitude of his prison cell, Jerry Whitman's defiance slowly gave way to silence. He refused to speak about Emily, or the night she vanished, his gaze fixed on the cracked concrete walls. Some officers believed he held the key to the mystery, but the man remained an enigma. Without a confession, the truth seemed to slip further from reach. Months turned to a year. The calendar marked the passage of time, each day a reminder of what had been lost. Emily's birthday passed with a candle-lit vigil at the park where she was last seen. Friends and family gathered, their faces illuminated by soft flames, voices raised in gentle song. They shared memories, her favorite books, the way she would laugh at the smallest joke, the kindness that shaped her every action. Grace held a photograph close, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. "I carry her with me," she whispered. "Always." In the winter's depths, Rhodes found himself walking the forest alone, snow crunched beneath his boots, breath misting in the crisp air. He paused by a cluster of trees, their branches bare and reaching like skeletal hands. The forest seemed endless, a vast labyrinth that both concealed and revealed. He thought of Emily, her spirit woven into the very soil and trees, her story unfinished, and though he had no answers, he vowed never to stop searching. As the seasons changed once more, the town of Marlow learned to live with the unknown. The ache of absence became a part of its rhythm, a silent pulse beneath everyday life. Neighbors reached out to one another with quiet compassion, shared meals and gentle words. Emily's name became a whisper of remembrance, a call to protect the fragile threads that bind us. In the years that followed, no further breakthroughs came. Emily's case became one of the many unresolved mysteries that linger in the corners of small towns, where daylight can't always chase away the shadows. But in the hearts of those who loved her, Emily remained present, a light that flickered, refusing to be extinguished. Detective Rhodes retired from active duty some years later, but the case never left him. It was a chapter that shaped his understanding of justice and loss. He kept a worn photograph of Emily on his mantle, a reminder of the human story behind every investigation. Grace Carter moved away from Marlow, seeking a fresh start but carrying the past with her. She became an advocate for missing persons, speaking softly but powerfully about the need for vigilance and compassion. Her voice reached others who had faced similar darkness, creating a network of support and hope. And so Emily Carter's story remains both a tragedy and a testament, a haunting echo of a life interrupted, and a quiet call to remember those who are lost but never forgotten. The forest still stands, silent and watchful, holding its secrets beneath the snow and stars, and somewhere, in the stillness, the hope for answers lingers, as enduring as the dawn. The years that followed Emily Carter's disappearance unfolded quietly, with the gentle persistence of seasons turning, lives moving forward even as the shadow of loss lingered just beneath the surface. Marlow itself, a town once tightly knit by familiarity and shared rhythms, found itself forever marked by a sense of fragile vigilance. Detective Samuel Rhodes had long since left the active investigation, his badge retired, but the memories firmly etched into his mind. The case was one that never truly closed, a lingering ache that shaped his understanding of the complexities of human vulnerability and the often elusive nature of justice. Yet for all the unanswered questions, the story of Emily Carter was not simply one of tragedy. It was a testament to the resilience of those left behind, their courage to seek hope amid uncertainty, and their determination to honor a life interrupted. Grace Carter had moved away from Marlow, settling in a quiet town several hours distant. The move was a conscious step toward healing, a chance to build a life not entirely defined by absence. Yet even in the new surroundings, the imprint of Emily's memory remained a steady presence. She became involved in advocacy work for families of missing persons, lending her voice to a cause that before she had scarcely imagined. Through support groups and outreach programs, Grace connected with others who lived the same haunting uncertainty, their shared stories weaving a tapestry of collective strength. Her advocacy was not loud or performative, but measured and thoughtful, a reflection of the quiet dignity that had carried her through the darkest days. "I don't want people to forget," she said once during a meeting, her voice steady, "because when we forget, the pain grows deeper. But when we remember, there is hope." Back in Marlow, the community had changed as well. The disappearance had brought to light a reality many had long avoided: the vulnerabilities that exist in even the safest places. Schools implemented new programs, focusing on safety and communication. Parents, once casual in their trust of neighbors and routines, grew more vigilant, but also more connected, forming networks to watch over one another's children. There was a collective effort to reclaim a sense of security without surrendering to fear. At the same time, the unresolved mystery of Emily's fate left a quiet scar on the town's soul. The woods that bordered Marlow, once a place of adventure and exploration, were now approached with caution and respect. Detective Rhodes, though retired, occasionally found himself drawn back into the echoes of the case. He would sit quietly in his home office, reviewing old notes, or rereading Emily's recovered journal pages, the fragments of her inner world that had given him the most profound insight into who she was. Through those words, he felt a connection that transcended time and space. Emily's writings revealed a young woman thoughtful beyond her years, grappling with fears she didn't fully understand, and a fierce desire to be heard. It was a reminder that behind every missing person is a story, rich and complex, deserving of care and attention. Despite the passage of years, the absence of closure weighed heavily on all involved. Jerry Whitman remained imprisoned, serving his sentence with a stoicism that baffled some and disturbed others. He never admitted guilt beyond the charges for which he was convicted, and his silence became another layer of the mystery. For Grace, the lack of definitive answers was a constant companion. Each milestone, birthdays, anniversaries, holidays, was shadowed by a yearning for the daughter who had vanished. Yet she held on to hope, fragile but unwavering. In the quiet moments, Grace often imagined what Emily's life might have been. Would she have gone to college, made lifelong friends, found a career that fulfilled her? These questions, unanswerable, were both a source of pain and a way to keep Emily's spirit alive. She spoke often of the importance of cherishing those we love while they are here, a message that resonated deeply with those around her. The town of Marlow commemorated Emily each year with a small gathering at the park where she was last seen. Friends, family, and neighbors would come together to share stories and memories, to light candles, and to sing quietly beneath the stars. It was a ritual of remembrance and solidarity, a way to hold the fragile threads of community tightly woven in the face of loss. Though Emily's disappearance remained unresolved, her story sparked changes that rippled beyond Marlow's borders. Law enforcement agencies in surrounding areas began collaborating more closely on missing persons cases, sharing information and resources in ways they had not before. Awareness campaigns spread, encouraging families to report concerns early, and emphasizing the importance of listening to children's fears. Emily's case became a somber example of the consequences when signals go unnoticed, a call to action rooted in empathy and vigilance. Detective Rhodes found solace in the relationships he maintained with other families who had lost loved ones. Together they navigated the difficult terrain of grief and uncertainty, supporting one another in the quiet hours when the world seemed most indifferent. In those connections, Rhodes discovered that justice was not always found in verdicts or convictions, but sometimes in shared understanding and compassion. The forest surrounding Marlow, once a silent witness to a terrible disappearance, began to heal in its own way. New growth pushed through the underbrush, and seasons cycled with steady regularity. Birdsong returned to the trees, and sunlight filtered gently through the branches. Yet for those who knew, the forest held its secrets, quiet, patient, waiting. Emily Carter's story is one of absence and presence, of darkness and light intertwined. It is a reminder that behind every missing person lies a human being, someone loved, missed, and remembered. Her disappearance transformed lives, reshaped a community, and touched the hearts of those who would never forget. In the end, the search for Emily became more than a case file. It was a call to honor the vulnerability and resilience of all who face the unknown. It was an invitation to listen with open hearts, to seek justice with patience, and to hold hope gently but firmly. And though the mystery remains unsolved, The enduring legacy of Emily Carter is a quiet testament to the power of remembrance.
The small town of Ashwood, nestled among rolling hills and dense forests in the Pacific Northwest, was the kind of place where everyone knew each other's names, and the rhythm of life moved slowly, shaped by the seasons and the land. It was a community steeped in traditions, a place where children played freely in the streets, and neighbors gathered on porches to share stories long into the evening. In early autumn of 1997, that gentle rhythm was fractured by the disappearance of Sarah Mitchell, a 17-year-old girl whose presence was as bright and steady as the autumn sun. Sarah was known for her quiet kindness, her love of books, and a smile that could soften even the hardest days. She worked part-time at the local library and dreamed of leaving Ashwood to study literature at a university far away. On the morning of October 12th, Sarah left her home with a promise to meet her best friend, Jenny, after school. She never arrived. When Jenny waited by the corner of Main Street, minutes turning to hours, a growing unease settled in her chest. That evening, Sarah was still missing. The initial search was immediate but cautious. The Ashwood Police Department, small but dedicated, organized search parties, canvassed neighbors, and followed up on every tip. Sarah's room, untouched, betrayed no sign of struggle or forewarning. Her diary lay on the nightstand, pages filled with the usual teenage musings, dreams, worries, hopes, but nothing to hint at the storm about to come. As night deepened, the town gathered in the community hall, faces pale and voices hushed. The sheriff, a man named Tom Bennett, spoke with measured calm, urging the town to hold on to hope and assist however they could. Yet, as days turned into weeks, the layers of mystery thickened. No new leads emerged. Sarah's phone showed no activity, and her social circles offered little insight. The forest around Ashwood, vast and often a source of solace, now seemed an ominous labyrinth, its shadows deep and impenetrable. Behind closed doors, her family grappled with a creeping dread. Her mother, Claire Mitchell, carried the weight of unspoken fears, her eyes often distant and red-rimmed from sleepless nights. Her father, David, a stoic man of few words, buried himself in work, struggling to hold the pieces of their shattered world together. Jenny visited often, replaying the last moments she shared with Sarah, searching for missed signs or whispered clues. The local media began to pick up the story, casting a light that felt both intrusive and necessary. Reporters filled the streets, cameras turned toward the Mitchell home, and headlines speculated on every possible theory. Among the whispers was the mention of a man seen lurking near the school on the day Sarah vanished, a figure unknown to the town but remembered by a few wary eyes. Sheriff Bennett ordered a careful investigation, but with limited resources and no concrete evidence, progress was slow. One cold morning, two hikers stumbled across a small, abandoned campsite deep in the woods. The site was scarcely more than a few miles from town, but hidden enough to escape casual notice. Among the scattered belongings was a scarf that bore a faint resemblance to one Sarah was known to wear, and a notebook with pages torn and stained. The discovery reignited hope, but also deepened the unease. The woods held their secrets tightly, and the question remained, what had happened to Sarah Mitchell, the girl who had vanished without a trace, leaving a town forever changed? The discovery of the campsite deepened the mystery surrounding Sarah Mitchell's disappearance and stirred the quiet town of Ashwood into renewed activity. The abandoned site, located several miles from the town's edge, nestled in a secluded clearing where the dense canopy of trees filtered sunlight into pale patches on the forest floor. To the casual observer, it appeared little more than a forgotten spot used perhaps by transient wanderers or campers who had moved on. But to the Ashwood Police Department and Sarah's family, it was a silent signal, a tangible thread in a web of uncertainty they longed to unravel. Sheriff Tom Bennett arrived at the site with his small team, careful to document every detail. The scarf, faded but distinct in its delicate knit, was immediately sent for forensic testing. The torn notebook, its pages stained and partially illegible, was handled with the utmost care, a fragile archive that might hold the key to understanding Sarah's final days. As the search expanded to the surrounding forest, the town's collective anxiety grew. Volunteers combed the underbrush, their footsteps muffled by fallen leaves,
voices soft and deliberate in the quiet woods. The autumn air was crisp and heavy with the scent of pine and damp earth, a stark contrast to the fear that now settled like a weight in the hearts of all who searched. Back in town, Claire Mitchell sat in the kitchen of their modest home, the walls lined with photographs of Sarah at different ages, a laughing child on a summer day, a proud graduate of middle school, a shy teenager clutching a book to her chest. Each image was a testament to a life paused, suspended in uncertainty. Claire's hands trembled slightly as she traced the outline of one photograph. The silence in the house was punctuated only by the occasional creak of the old floorboards, a reminder of the world continuing on outside, even as their own felt irrevocably changed. David Mitchell returned from work each evening later than before, his face drawn and tired. He rarely spoke about the investigation, instead focusing on practicalities, meeting with police, arranging search parties, fielding calls from reporters. His stoicism was both a shield and a burden, a quiet expression of his grief that often left Claire feeling isolated in her sorrow. The local school remained open, but the absence of Sarah was palpable. Her locker sat untouched, a shrine of schoolbooks and personal notes that now seemed relics of a life abruptly interrupted. Teachers spoke softly about the importance of supporting one another, while students whispered in hallways, their conversations laced with a mixture of fear and speculation. Jenny, Sarah's closest friend, struggled with a complex blend of guilt and helplessness. She spent long nights replaying their last conversation in her mind, searching for any overlooked detail. The promise to meet after school had gone unfulfilled, and the weight of that empty promise haunted her. In one of their shared journals, Jenny found a note from Sarah, written just days before her disappearance. "Sometimes I feel like I'm invisible, even to the people who love me. Like no one really hears what I'm trying to say." The words struck Jenny deeply, prompting questions she had never voiced. Was Sarah hiding something? Did she feel trapped or afraid in ways none had recognized? Meanwhile, the forensic analysis of the scarf revealed subtle traces of dirt and plant material, consistent with the forest area where the campsite had been found. More significant, however, was the presence of faint fibers that did not match Sarah's clothing or belongings, fibers that might belong to another person. The torn notebook's pages, though damaged, contained fragments of Sarah's handwriting. Forensic experts carefully reconstructed the legible sections, revealing entries that hinted at growing unease. One passage, dated a week before her disappearance, read, "I saw someone watching me today, near the school. It wasn't anyone I know. It made me uncomfortable, but I didn't tell anyone. I didn't want to make a fuss." Another entry was less clear but seemed to reference a meeting or appointment. "I agreed to meet him tomorrow after class. I hope I made the right choice." The ambiguity sent ripples through the investigation. Who was he? Was Sarah's disappearance linked to someone she had recently encountered, or was this an innocent plan gone wrong? Sheriff Bennett and his team intensified their efforts to identify the man seen near the school the day Sarah vanished. They interviewed dozens of students, teachers and residents, piecing together descriptions and sightings. One witness, a local shopkeeper, remembered a man in his late 30s or early 40s, unkempt and nervous, who had asked about Sarah in the weeks prior to her disappearance. The man had seemed out of place in Ashwood, unfamiliar with the town's rhythms and wary of drawing attention. Another lead came from a mechanic, who recalled a vehicle matching the description of a rusted pickup truck parked near the forest edge several times in recent weeks. Despite these fragments, no definitive identification emerged. In the days that followed, the town's hope wavered between cautious optimism and quiet despair. Each new discovery brought a fleeting surge of possibility, only to be met with the harsh reality of limited answers. The Mitchell family's grief was compounded by the public attention. Reporters camped outside their home, asking questions that sometimes felt intrusive, reducing Sarah to a headline or a mystery to solve. Claire often retreated to the privacy of her garden, seeking solace among the blooming chrysanthemums and late-season roses. Gardening, once a shared activity with Sarah, became a means to hold on to fragments of normalcy. David, too, found moments of escape in solitary walks along the river that bordered Ashwood, his mind grappling with memories and the relentless what-ifs that haunted him. The town's children were cautioned to stay close to home after dark, their parents' voices tinged with an unfamiliar urgency. School counselors offered support, though many students struggled silently, the absence of their peer a stark void. Sheriff Bennett convened a task force, bringing in specialists from the state police to assist. The expanded investigation included searches with cadaver dogs, aerial reconnaissance, and interviews extending beyond Ashwood's borders. One promising development came when a local resident reported seeing a figure matching the man's description, leaving the forest the morning after Sarah disappeared. The report suggested the possibility that Sarah had been held somewhere nearby, perhaps even within the community. The police broadened their scope, revisiting old leads and examining known offenders in the region. They discovered a man living in a neighboring town with a history of stalking and harassment, who had recently moved close to Ashwood. However, after thorough investigation, no concrete connection to Sarah's disappearance was established. As winter approached, the forest transformed from the warm hues of autumn to a stark landscape of bare branches and cold earth. The search slowed with the first snowfall, but the investigation continued relentlessly. The Mitchells faced their first holiday season without Sarah. Thanksgiving was subdued, marked by quiet dinners and whispered prayers. Claire struggled with the contrast between community celebrations and the emptiness in their home. Jenny's family invited Claire and David to their table, an act of kindness that was both comforting and bittersweet. Jenny, meanwhile, withdrew further into herself, her grief compounded by guilt and the weight of unanswered questions. At school, memorials for Sarah were held, each event a reminder of the fragile thread between life and loss. Students lit candles, shared poems, and placed flowers near the school's entrance. The community rallied around the Mitchell family, their collective grief forging bonds of support, even as the pain remained raw. One evening, as snowflakes drifted gently outside, Sheriff Bennett sat in his office, reviewing the case files. The weight of the investigation pressed upon him, each lead, each detail, a piece of a puzzle that refused to fit neatly. He considered the man seen near the school, the torn notebook entries, the abandoned campsite. Every clue was a whisper from the past, a faint call across the void. He reached out once more to the people who had reported sightings, asking for any overlooked details. Sometimes, he thought, answers lay in the quietest moments, in memories long buried beneath the noise of daily life. The case of Sarah Mitchell was no longer simply an investigation, it was a vigil, a testament to the human heart's refusal to surrender to darkness. Though months had passed, and the town of Ashwood had grown accustomed to the absence, the search for truth continued, slow and steady as the turning seasons. And beneath the surface, the hope remained, a fragile ember flickering but unextinguished. The turning of the year brought a quiet stillness to Ashwood, as winter deepened its hold on the town and the forest beyond. Snow blanketed the landscape in soft white, muffling sounds, and transforming familiar paths into unfamiliar trails. The cold seemed to seep into the bones of the community, settling alongside the unshakable sorrow that had taken root since Sarah Mitchell's disappearance. Yet beneath the quiet surface, the investigation pressed onward. Sheriff Bennett, undeterred by the months of uncertainty, continued to seek answers with a relentless patience born of duty and empathy. Each day, he reviewed reports, spoke with witnesses, and met with specialists brought in to assist with the complex case. One of the most significant developments came unexpectedly, in the form of a letter. It arrived one frosty morning, slipped under the door of the Ashwood Police Department. The envelope was plain, the handwriting careful but hurried, and it bore no return address. Inside was a note, brief but urgent. "I know what happened to Sarah. Meet me at the old mill at midnight." The note stirred a ripple of tension and hope. The old mill, a decaying structure on the outskirts of town, had long been a place whispered about by locals, a relic of Ashwood's past, now abandoned and overgrown. Sheriff Bennett debated the risk, but knew that such opportunities, however uncertain, could not be ignored. He assembled a small team, taking care to prepare for whatever might await in the shadows of the mill. That night, under a sky veiled with heavy clouds, they arrived at the crumbling building. The air was sharp and still, the only sounds the crunch of boots on frozen earth and the distant call of an owl. Minutes stretched into an hour. No one appeared. Just as the tension began to ease, a figure emerged from the darkness, cloaked in a thick jacket, face obscured by a hood. The stranger spoke in a low voice, careful and measured. "I didn't want to come forward before. I was scared. But Sarah, she was in trouble." The man's name was Tom Harris, a drifter who had passed through Ashwood months before Sarah's disappearance. He described seeing Sarah near the forest edge, speaking with a man fitting the descriptions that had surfaced in the investigation. He claimed the man was aggressive, and that Sarah had seemed frightened. Harris recounted how he had followed the man and Sarah to the abandoned mill, where a confrontation had occurred. According to Harris, the man threatened Sarah, and she fled into the woods, but he lost sight of her in the darkness. Though Harris's account offered new insight, it also raised questions. Why had he waited so long to speak? Could his memory be trusted after so much time? Sheriff Bennett knew the importance of corroborating every detail, wary of false leads or desperate fabrications. Meanwhile, the search continued around the old mill, focusing on the dense underbrush and the nearby creek where footprints and broken branches hinted at recent movement. Days later, a breakthrough came when a local teenager, out hiking with his dog, discovered a small bundle hidden beneath a tangle of roots. Inside were several personal items, a locket engraved with Sarah's initials, a worn paperback book she had loved, and a scrap of fabric that matched the scarf found at the campsite months earlier. The discovery was both a confirmation and a heartbreak. It placed Sarah somewhere near the mill after her disappearance, but also underscored the brutal reality that she had been struggling to survive in the unforgiving wilderness. The community responded with renewed vigor. Volunteers organized additional search parties, braving the cold and snow to comb the forest and riverbanks. Some searched for physical clues, others simply hoped to find a sign of Sarah herself. In the Mitchell home, the weight of waiting grew heavier. Claire and David clung to each other in the evenings, finding comfort in shared silence. The photographs of Sarah on the walls seemed to watch over them, a quiet presence in the rooms now marked by absence. Jenny, too, felt the impact deeply. The knowledge that Sarah had been so close to the town, yet out of reach, gnawed at her. She began attending counseling sessions offered by the school, where she could voice her feelings and fears in a safe space. The investigation turned again toward the man described by witnesses, but the search for him remained elusive. Police scoured records and canvassed neighboring towns, but found no trace. The mystery deepened when forensic analysis revealed traces of blood on the fabric found near the mill. The samples were insufficient for conclusive identification, but added a grim layer to the case. Despite setbacks, Sheriff Bennett maintained a steady resolve. He recognized the toll the case was taking on the community and on Sarah's family, and he worked tirelessly to keep the investigation moving forward. One afternoon, a breakthrough arrived from an unexpected source, a woman named Marlene, who lived alone near the forest edge. She reported seeing a strange vehicle parked near her property in the days following Sarah's disappearance. The truck was similar to descriptions given by the mechanic, and Marlene had noticed a man entering and leaving the woods with large bags. Her account gave investigators a new location to explore, and a search was launched in the area around Marlene's home. That search uncovered signs of a recent fire, a small clearing where ashes and burnt debris indicated someone had tried to destroy evidence. Among the remains, investigators found fragments of fabric and what appeared to be a damaged cell phone. The phone was sent for forensic analysis, hopeful that it might yield clues. Back in town, the tension between hope and despair remained palpable. Families lit candles in windows, neighbors offered quiet support, and the collective heartbeat of Ashwood echoed the longing for closure. At the same time, the psychological toll of the case became increasingly evident. Mental health professionals, noted the rise in anxiety and depression among teenagers and adults alike. The fear that had quietly crept into daily life was no longer contained, it was a shared shadow. The sheriff organized community meetings, inviting residents to speak and share concerns. These gatherings became a space to acknowledge grief, express fears, and reinforce the bonds that held Ashwood together. Throughout it all, the Mitchell family faced each day with a fragile courage. Claire began writing letters to Sarah, pouring her thoughts and prayers onto the page, hoping that somehow, those words might reach her daughter. David took to visiting the forest daily, leaving small tokens in the places where Sarah might have passed. A scarf, a flower, a note, acts of remembrance and hope woven into the landscape. Jenny found solace in a small group of friends who shared her sorrow. Together they created a memorial garden near the school, planting perennials that would bloom each spring, a living tribute to Sarah's memory. Despite the relentless passage of time, no definitive answers emerged. The man who had threatened Sarah remained unidentified, the path she took that night obscured by darkness and silence. Yet within the void, a quiet strength endured. The people of Ashwood, bound by loss and love, held on to the belief that truth would one day surface. In the months that followed, Sarah's case became more than a missing person investigation. It became a reflection on the fragility of life, the resilience of community, and the enduring power of hope. And as the snow melted into the early signs of spring, the forest stood silent witness to a story still unfolding, one of a girl who had vanished, and a town that refused to forget. Spring arrived slowly in Ashwood, washing away the last remnants of winter's chill, with gentle rain and budding leaves. The forest, once stark and bare, now hummed softly with new life, the whisper of fresh growth, the delicate rustling of early blossoms, and the steady murmur of streams swollen with melted snow. Yet beneath the revival of the natural world, the town remained quietly burdened by the absence of Sarah Mitchell. The months since the discovery near the old mill had been both a time of guarded hope and persistent frustration. The investigation, though thorough, yielded no final answers. The damaged cell phone found in the ashes by Marlene's property revealed nothing more than fragmented messages and corrupted data, a digital ghost offering no clue to Sarah's fate. The fibers found on the scarf and the torn notebook entries lingered as tantalizing traces, hints of an unseen narrative that refused to be fully uncovered. Sheriff Bennett and his team continued their work, revisiting witnesses, analyzing every detail, but as spring deepened, the case grew colder in the conventional sense. No new sightings, no fresh evidence, no breakthroughs that could bring Sarah home. For the Mitchell family, this limbo was a harsh place to live. Claire found herself caught between hope and despair, her days marked by the rhythms of waiting. Each phone call, each knock on the door, held the potential to change everything, or to deepen the silence. Her mornings began with a quiet ritual, lighting a candle for Sarah, placing fresh flowers on the windowsill, and reading from a journal she had started shortly after the disappearance, where she recorded memories, prayers, and letters to her daughter. David remained a pillar of strength in public, but privately struggled with the weight of helplessness. His daily visits to the forest became less about searching, and more about connection, standing in the places Sarah might have walked, leaving small mementos in the earth, and hoping that somehow his presence bridged the distance between absence and memory. Jenny, too, carried a complicated grief. She found healing in the memorial garden she and her friends nurtured, watching the plants grow as a symbol of enduring love and remembrance. Counseling sessions gave her space to untangle feelings of guilt, fear and sorrow, and slowly, she began to reclaim parts of herself lost in the shadow of Sarah's disappearance. The town of Ashwood moved cautiously forward, its collective heart marked by loss yet resilient in spirit. The school implemented programs to raise awareness about safety and mental health, while community groups rallied around families dealing with similar fears. In the midst of this fragile healing, a quiet revelation emerged, not from new evidence or dramatic leads, but from the steady, painstaking efforts of everyday kindness. One spring afternoon, a woman named Helen, who worked at the town's library, came forward with a small but significant detail. She had noticed a young man, new to Ashwood, who frequented the library during the months before Sarah disappeared. He had borrowed books on survival skills, local geography, and psychology. Though unremarkable on the surface, his presence had gone unnoticed until now. With this information, the police revisited records, and soon identified a man named Mark Evans. He was a transient, with a history of minor offenses, and an itinerant lifestyle. While no direct link to Sarah could be established initially, investigators found that Evans had been in the vicinity during the time of her disappearance. The discovery prompted a renewed search for Evans, but he had already moved on. In conversations with locals, a portrait began to form of a man who was both enigmatic and unsettling, someone who blended into the background, yet carried a restless energy that unsettled those who crossed his path. Despite the frustration of an elusive suspect, the investigators viewed this lead as a beacon, proof that the pieces of the puzzle were slowly aligning. Months passed with no further contact or evidence, but the Mitchell family, bolstered by community support, learned to live with uncertainty. They understood that the truth might remain forever out of reach, but the love for Sarah was constant, a quiet fire that refused to dim. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees and painted the sky in soft shades of pink and gold, Claire stood at the edge of the forest with David and Jenny. They spoke little, their thoughts heavy yet shared. Claire spoke first, her voice soft but steady. "We don't have all the answers, and maybe we never will. But we have each other, and we have the memories of Sarah, the parts of her that live in us, in this town." David nodded, his hand finding Claire's. "She touched all our lives," he said. "Even in her absence, she's brought us together." Jenny, looking at the trees where she and Sarah had once played, added quietly, "And we carry her with us." The forest around them seemed to breathe, a living reminder of the fragile balance between presence and absence, memory and reality. In the months and years that followed, the story of Sarah Mitchell became a part of Ashwood's quiet history, a reminder of vulnerability, resilience, and the enduring search for truth. The community marked anniversaries with small gatherings, lighting candles and sharing stories. They honored Sarah, not only as a missing girl, but as a symbol of the love that persists, even when hope feels fragile. Sheriff Bennett, now nearing retirement, reflected often on the case. He recognized that some mysteries resist final closure, that justice is not always a clear line, but sometimes a winding path. The lessons learned, the bonds formed, and the compassion shown mattered deeply. He kept a small photo of Sarah on his desk, a reminder of the human story behind every case. Though Sarah's fate remains unknown, her story is not defined solely by loss. It is a testament to the strength of community, the enduring power of love, and the quiet courage of those left behind. As night falls on Ashwood, the stars emerge in the vast sky above, a gentle, unwavering presence. Like those stars, the memory of Sarah Mitchell shines quietly, soft, steady, and never forgotten. Thank you for listening. Wherever you are in the world, may you find peace in the quiet moments, and hold close those you love. If this story moved you, feel free to like, subscribe, and share where you are listening from. Your support helps keep these stories alive, honoring the lives and memories behind them.
In the late summer of 1993, the small town of Willow Creek lay nestled deep within the Appalachian Mountains, its narrow streets lined with weathered houses, each telling stories of generations who had lived and worked in the shadow of the forest. The town's pace was slow, the rhythm of life measured by the changing seasons, and the quiet flow of the creek that gave the town its name. Among the residents was Rebecca Harper, a young woman of 27 whose life was woven into the fabric of Willow Creek. Rebecca worked at the local library, a modest building with creaking floors and walls lined with books worn soft by time. She was known for her gentle smile, her quiet kindness, and a deep love for stories, both the ones she read and those she lived. Rebecca's days were marked by simple pleasures: morning walks through the town's park, evenings spent reading by the fireplace, and weekends visiting her aging grandmother May, who lived in a cabin just beyond the town's edge. The community admired Rebecca's warmth and dedication. She was someone who carried herself with a quiet strength, unassuming yet unbreakable. As summer deepened, whispers began to ripple through Willow Creek. Rebecca had not been seen for several days. It was unlike her to disappear without notice. Concern grew slowly at first, then swelled into worry. On the morning of August 23rd, May Harper arrived at Rebecca's apartment to find the door unlocked, the inside dim and still. The scent of lavender lingered faintly in the air, but Rebecca was nowhere to be found. Her belongings lay untouched, and her favorite book rested open on the coffee table, the page fluttering slightly in a breeze from the cracked window. May's calls to Rebecca's friends and co-workers brought no answers. No one had seen her since the weekend before. It was as if she had vanished into the mountain air. The local sheriff, Henry Caldwell, was notified. A man of steady demeanor and years of experience, Caldwell took the report seriously. Though missing persons cases were rare in Willow Creek, he knew the mountains held secrets, and sometimes darkness beneath the serene surface. The initial search was cautious but thorough. Deputies combed through the dense woods, calling Rebecca's name into the thick canopy, while volunteers gathered to help in the effort. Days stretched on, the silence growing heavier. Neighbors spoke in hushed tones, recalling seeing Rebecca on the evening of August 20th at the town's diner, sitting alone with a notebook, writing intently. A waitress remembered her glancing over her shoulder nervously, as if expecting someone. There were no signs of a struggle, no obvious leads. As the search expanded, Sheriff Caldwell discovered a pattern: several reports from locals who mentioned a shadowy figure seen near the library in the days before Rebecca's disappearance. A man described as tall, with a dark jacket and an unreadable expression. Some said he was watching the building, others that he had spoken to Rebecca in hushed tones. Despite these accounts, no one could identify the man, and no records indicated he had lived or worked in Willow Creek. Inside the library, Rebecca's desk was found just as she had left it, organized with notes scattered about a local history project she had been working on. Her handwriting was neat, the pages filled with names and dates, but one passage stood out. A cryptic line written in the margin read, "The past never stays buried." This phrase puzzled those who read it, suggesting that Rebecca's disappearance might be tied to something deeper than a simple missing person case. Days turned into weeks. The forest remained silent. The creek's steady murmur seemed to echo the town's anxious heartbeat. In the quiet hours of one restless night, Sheriff Caldwell sat at his desk, poring over the case files. The faces of the townsfolk, the whispered rumors, the shadowy figure, they all formed a mosaic of questions with no clear answers. He understood that beyond the search for Rebecca was a deeper story, one of secrets, fear, and the complex interplay between past and present. As Willow Creek braced itself for the coming fall, the question lingered in the cool mountain air: what had happened to Rebecca Harper, and could the town unravel the mystery before it was too late? The days following Rebecca Harper's disappearance were a slow unfolding of shadows and whispered fears in Willow Creek. As the town's heartbeat quickened with worry, each person felt the weight of the unknown pressing in around them, heavy as the thick mountain mist that rolled in each morning. Sheriff Henry Caldwell remained at the center of the search, a steady presence who bore the burden of uncertainty with quiet resolve. His experience had taught him that time was both an adversary and an ally in missing persons cases. Early hours could bring breakthroughs, but as days stretched on, the trail often grew colder, the truth more elusive. In the case of Rebecca Harper, the difficulty was compounded by the landscape itself. The dense Appalachian forest surrounding Willow Creek was a place of beauty and mystery, its tangled underbrush and winding trails capable of swallowing even the most determined searchers. The creek's rocky outcrops and hidden caves had long been the setting of local legends, stories whispered around campfires that spoke of lost travelers and unseen dangers. Caldwell knew that the environment was as much a factor as any human element in the unfolding mystery. From the moment May Harper reported her granddaughter missing, the family had been a wellspring of strength and sorrow.
May, a woman in her 70s with soft grey hair and steady hands, refused to succumb to despair. Each morning she rose before dawn, lighting candles in the cabin and whispering prayers into the quiet air. Her hope was a fragile thread, woven into the fabric of the search efforts and the town's collective concern. David Harper, Rebecca's uncle, had come from a neighboring county to offer support. He was a man of few words but deep feeling, his jaw often set with quiet determination. Together, May and David coordinated the small army of volunteers who scoured the forest, mapping every trail, creek and rocky ledge in meticulous detail. Rebecca's closest friends gathered regularly, sharing memories and fears. Among them was Laura Mills, a childhood friend who worked as a nurse in a nearby town. Laura spoke of Rebecca's thoughtful nature and her habit of writing in her notebook whenever she was troubled or uncertain. She was always searching for something. Laura said one afternoon, her voice soft and trembling, "Maybe answers. Maybe peace." That notebook had become a point of fascination and hope. The pages, filled with neat handwriting and careful observations, hinted at Rebecca's curiosity about the town's past, especially a series of old disappearances from decades before. It was this connection between past and present that began to take shape as Caldwell and his deputies dug into the archives of Willow Creek. The town's history was marked by a string of unresolved mysteries dating back to the 1950s and 1960s. Several young women had vanished without explanation, their cases closed or forgotten, overshadowed by time and the changing face of the community. Few records remained, and those that did were fragmentary. Police reports filled with conjecture, rumors of cult activity, or natural accidents. Rebecca's interest in these cases, especially as revealed in her notebook, suggested she had been searching for something hidden beneath the surface of Willow Creek's quiet charm. Sheriff Caldwell brought in a specialist to help with the case, an archivist named Evelyn Price, whose expertise in historical records and forensic analysis of old documents promised new insights. Evelyn spent long hours poring over faded newspapers, yellowed photographs, and handwritten journals, seeking connections between the past disappearances and Rebecca's recent vanishing. One afternoon, Evelyn called Caldwell with a discovery. A faded newspaper clipping from 1958 described the disappearance of a young woman named Clara Donovan, who vanished near the same forest that now loomed over Willow Creek like a silent sentinel. Clara's case had been closed after a month-long search, but no body was ever found, and her disappearance had remained a ghost in the town's memory. Evelyn shared a photo of Clara, a young woman with a tentative smile and eyes that seemed to hold both hope and sorrow. Caldwell studied the image, struck by a resemblance to Rebecca, not in appearance, but in the quiet strength reflected in her gaze. "It's as if the forest holds on to these stories," Evelyn said softly, and maybe Rebecca was drawn to uncovering them. Meanwhile, back in the present, the search for Rebecca continued. Deputies had expanded their patrols deeper into the mountains, following leads that brought them to old logging roads, abandoned cabins, and narrow paths that twisted into the wilderness. One such path led to a small clearing near the base of a ridge, where Caldwell and his team found a weathered leather bracelet, partially buried in the dirt. The bracelet was simple, plain leather with a silver clasp, and though it bore no name or inscription, it was unmistakably Rebecca's. She had worn it daily, a gift from May. The discovery offered a bittersweet hope. It confirmed that Rebecca had ventured further into the forest than anyone had imagined, but it also raised questions about what had happened there. Searchers carefully combed the surrounding area, finding nothing more but signs of disturbed earth and broken branches, as if someone or something had passed through in haste. Sheriff Caldwell felt a growing unease. The forest was vast, the terrain treacherous, and the clues scarce. Each discovery seemed to deepen the mystery rather than bring clarity. As the days lengthened into weeks, tension in Willow Creek shifted from hopeful anticipation to quiet dread. The shadowy figure reported near the library remained unidentified. Witnesses who had glimpsed him described a man who avoided eye contact, moving with purpose but leaving no trace. Caldwell's team checked databases for anyone matching the description, but found no recent records or known associates in the region. The man's presence raised unsettling questions. Had Rebecca encountered someone she feared? Was this figure connected to the older disappearances? Or was he something entirely different, a stranger passing through who became part of the town's unfolding nightmare? At night, the town was held in a fragile silence, broken only by the distant call of owls and the soft rush of the creek. Residents left porch lights burning, doors locked with care, and thoughts heavy with the unknown. In Rebecca's apartment, May and David went through her things, hoping to find something overlooked. Among the pages of the notebook, they discovered a folded letter, written in Rebecca's careful hand but unsigned. The letter was addressed to an unknown recipient, and spoke of fears and discoveries, of a secret buried in the mountains that threatened to unravel the fabric of the town's history. "I have found things no one else has dared to seek," the letter read. "The past is not what it seems, and those who look too closely may find themselves in danger. If you are reading this, know that I trust you. Please keep searching, for the truth must come to light." The letter was both a beacon and a warning, its words echoing through the hearts of those who read them. Sheriff Caldwell shared the letter with Evelyn Price, who believed it might hold the key to unlocking the mystery. Together they planned a careful investigation into the clues Rebecca had left behind. Their research led them to an old family, who had lived on the outskirts of town for generations, the Carsons. The Carsons were known for their reclusive nature, their deep knowledge of the forest, and a reputation that bordered on folklore. Some whispered that the family was connected to the strange disappearances from decades past. Caldwell and Evelyn approached the Carson homestead cautiously. The house was a weathered structure, surrounded by towering pines, with windows that seemed to watch silently. They were met by Thomas Carson, an elderly man with sharp eyes and a measured voice. He spoke little but acknowledged Rebecca's name with a somber nod. "She was a good girl," Thomas said quietly. "Curious, brave. She asked questions some prefer left unanswered." When pressed about the past disappearances, Thomas's expression darkened. "There are things in these woods that don't like to be disturbed," he said. "Stories that keep themselves alive by silence." His words were chilling, carrying the weight of generations of secrets. Caldwell and Evelyn left the Carson home with more questions than answers, but with a sense that the key to Rebecca's disappearance was tied to something deeper, rooted in the town's history, and shadowed by fear. Back at the sheriff's office, Caldwell stared out the window at the mountains bathed in late afternoon light. The peaceful landscape betrayed nothing of the undercurrents swirling beneath. Rebecca Harper remained missing. The shadowy figure was still out there. The forest kept its secrets close, and Willow Creek held its breath, waiting for the past to speak. As August gave way to September, Willow Creek remained suspended in a delicate state of quiet unease. The relentless search for Rebecca Harper had shifted into a new phase, less frantic, more methodical, but with an ever-deepening sense of urgency. The town's fabric, once comfortably stitched together by familiarity and routine, now bore the frayed edges of fear and uncertainty. Sheriff Henry Caldwell spent long hours in his office, surrounded by maps marked with search zones, timelines, and notes from deputies and volunteers. Each day brought new pieces of the puzzle, but instead of fitting neatly, they seemed to form a larger, more complicated picture, one woven with history, secrets, and human frailty. Caldwell often found himself reflecting on Rebecca's last known movements. The reports from the diner, the mysterious figure near the library, the leather bracelet found in the clearing, all fragments of a story that refused to be told clearly. His investigation into the Carsons' connection to the past disappearances opened new pathways, but also met resistance. The Carsons were reluctant to speak, their silence heavy with unspoken history. Thomas Carson's cryptic warnings about the forest and the stories that keep themselves alive by silence seemed to capture the essence of the town's hidden turmoil. One afternoon, Caldwell received a call from Evelyn Price, the archivist. Her voice carried a mixture of excitement and apprehension. "I found something you need to see," she said. At the sheriff's office, Evelyn spread out several documents, old letters, faded photographs, and a diary fragment belonging to Clara Donovan, the young woman who had vanished in 1958. The diary, brittle with age, revealed a side of Clara previously unknown, a sharp mind, a keen observer of the town's undercurrents, and a woman increasingly aware that her life was intertwined with something dangerous. Clara wrote of meetings with a secretive group within Willow Creek, individuals bound by loyalty to old customs and a shared silence. She hinted at rituals in the forest and warnings to stay away, but also at her determination to uncover the truth. Reading the diary, Caldwell felt the weight of history pressing down on the present. Clara's words mirrored Rebecca's recent notes and fears, suggesting a continuum of danger that had survived the decades. Meanwhile, in the town, the search efforts took on a different character. Volunteers organized night patrols, wary of the growing rumors that a presence haunted the woods. Stories began to emerge, snatches of conversations overheard, strange lights glimpsed between the trees, the feeling of being watched. One such volunteer, Mark Jensen, recalled an unsettling experience. While searching near an old logging road, he stumbled upon an area where the ground appeared recently disturbed. Nearby faint footprints led toward a narrow path disappearing into thick undergrowth. Mark's unease grew as he realized the prints were fresh, yet no one else had reported being in the area. He described the sensation as like stepping into someone else's secret, a feeling echoed by others who spoke of the forest's strange energy. Inside the library, the place Rebecca had loved, her desk remained untouched, a shrine to absence. The community left flowers and notes, small acts of hope amid growing despair. Librarian Helen Roberts, a quiet woman with years of dedication, spoke softly of Rebecca's spirit. She was searching for light in the dark. Helen said, "Maybe that's what led her here." As the investigation unfolded, Caldwell learned more about the shadowy figure seen near the library. A local man, David Simmons, came forward with a confession that sent ripples through the case. He admitted to briefly speaking with a man fitting the description, a stranger who had arrived in town days before Rebecca vanished, asking pointed questions about the library and the town's history. David described the stranger as intense, almost desperate, with eyes that seemed haunted. The man had asked repeatedly about old disappearances, the forest, and specific families, names like Carson among them. But before David could learn more, the stranger had disappeared, leaving behind only a cryptic warning: some truths are better left buried. The revelation added a new layer of complexity. Was this man connected to Rebecca's disappearance? Was he a seeker of truth like Rebecca, or something darker? Caldwell's instincts told him the answers lay deep in the forest, among the forgotten trails and hidden places where past and present converged. One crisp evening, Caldwell and Evelyn ventured into the woods, following the narrow path where the leather bracelet had been found. The fading light cast long shadows among the trees, and the air grew cooler, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth. They moved slowly, careful to note the subtle changes, the broken branches, the faint impressions in the soil. After about an hour, they reached a small clearing, surrounded by ancient oaks, their gnarled roots twisting like silent sentinels. In the center of the clearing lay remnants of a campfire, blackened stones encircling ashes long cold. Nearby, fragments of paper were scattered, weathered and torn. Evelyn carefully gathered the pieces, recognizing them as parts of a handwritten journal, one that appeared to be Rebecca's. As they examined the pages, a picture emerged of a young woman drawn deeper into a web of secrets. Rebecca had chronicled her encounters, fears and discoveries, revealing a journey both intellectual and deeply personal. Her writing spoke of encounters with members of the Carson family, of whispered warnings, and of a determination to break the cycle of silence. She had sensed that the disappearances were not random, but connected to an ancient pact, a force bound to the forest and the town's uneasy peace. Rebecca's words revealed a vulnerability beneath her strength, a growing fear that her search had put her in danger, but also a resolve to find the truth, no matter the cost. As Caldwell and Evelyn packed the journal fragments carefully, a soft rustling came from the edge of the clearing. They turned, hearts quickening, but saw only a shadow slipping between the trees. The forest held its secrets still. Back in town, The ripple effects of Rebecca's disappearance were felt deeply. The community's sense of safety was fractured, replaced by a cautious vigilance. People locked doors earlier, checked on neighbors more often, and whispered about the forest's ancient power. May Harper, despite the pain of not knowing, remained a pillar of quiet strength. She often spoke to Rebecca's memory as if she was still near, reading aloud from her granddaughter's notebook, hoping the words might reach her. Rebecca believed in the light, May said softly one afternoon to David, and a small group gathered in the cabin. And sometimes, the light shines brightest in the darkest places. David, though stoic, allowed himself moments of vulnerability. The loss of Rebecca was not just a mystery, it was a wound. He often found himself standing at the edge of the forest, searching the shadows for answers that eluded him. The sheriff's office received an anonymous letter one morning, its contents chilling in their brevity. You do not know what you are disturbing. Stop before it is too late. The note was unsigned, the paper plain, but the message was clear. Caldwell understood that the search for Rebecca had stirred something deeply buried, something that did not want to be uncovered. As September slipped into October, the days grew shorter, the mountain air crisp and sharp. The search continued, but hope was tempered by the growing realization that this was more than a simple missing persons case. It was a story of history and fear, of human courage, and the shadows that live beneath the surface of even the quietest towns. And in the heart of Willow Creek, the question remained, would Rebecca Harper's voice, lost among the trees and silence, ever be heard again? The arrival of October brought a coolness to Willow Creek, the morning fog settling thick among the mountain pines like a veil drawn over the town's secrets. Days shortened, and the quiet spaces where Rebecca's presence had once been felt now seemed hollow, filled only with absence and lingering questions. Sheriff Henry Caldwell sat at his desk, the scattered pages of Rebecca's recovered journal spread before him, alongside the older documents Evelyn Price had uncovered. Each piece of paper was a thread in a tapestry that wove together past and present, a tapestry marked by lost silence and the persistent pull of something unseen. Despite the mounting evidence, the picture remained incomplete. The forest had revealed fragments, but withheld its heart. Caldwell's mind often returned to the mysterious figure last seen near the library, to the whispered warnings, and to the chilling anonymous note that had arrived at the sheriff's office. These were signs perhaps of a presence watching, waiting, an invisible boundary that no one dared to cross fully. May Harper, meanwhile, held fast to her hope. Her daily rituals continued, a quiet defiance against the encroaching darkness. She spoke often of Rebecca's spirit, not lost, but somewhere in the shadows, searching as well. Sometimes, May said one evening, her voice steady despite the fatigue in her eyes, the answers come not in light, but in understanding the darkness. Rebecca knew that. The community's support for the Harper family never waned. Vigils were held in the town square, candles flickering like small beacons against the night. Friends and strangers alike gathered, sharing stories of Rebecca, sharing memories and prayers. Laura Mills, Rebecca's childhood friend, often spoke of the gentle strength beneath her friend's curiosity. She wasn't reckless. Laura insisted during one gathering. She was brave. She wanted to make sense of a world that often made no sense. This bravery, it seemed, had drawn Rebecca into a place where few had dared to look before. The Carsons, too, had become a reluctant focus of the investigation. Thomas Carson's cryptic warnings suggested a history that the family had protected for generations, a history intertwined with the forest and the strange disappearances that had haunted Willow Creek. One afternoon, Sheriff Caldwell received a call from Thomas's grandson, Michael Carson. The young man's voice was hesitant, but resolute. "There are things my family never wanted to talk about," Michael said, "but I think it's time to stop hiding." He arranged to meet Caldwell and Evelyn at the Carson homestead, a meeting tinged with tension but also possibility. In the dim light of the old house, Michael spoke carefully. He recounted stories told by his grandfather and other elders, stories of a pact made long ago, a fragile truce with the forest, and a cycle of disappearances meant to maintain a balance. The details were shrouded in myth and fear, but the message was clear. The town's history was bound to the land in ways that defied easy understanding. Michael revealed a hidden journal, passed down through his family, containing references to rituals, names and dates, including those matching the past disappearances, and chillingly the present. "We thought the past was over," Michael said, "but maybe it never was." The revelation sent a ripple through the investigation, offering a glimpse into a story far larger than any one person. It was a story of loyalty and silence, of fear and survival. Back in the forest, Caldwell and Evelyn planned a careful search of a location mentioned in the Carson Journal, a secluded cave believed to be central to the ancient pact. The cave was difficult to reach, hidden beneath a thicket of brambles and shadowed by towering cliffs. The path leading to it was steep and treacherous, the air cool and damp as they descended. Inside, the cave's walls were etched with faded symbols, worn by time but still visible. The atmosphere was heavy, as if the air itself remembered the countless stories whispered there. Evelyn carefully documented the markings, while Caldwell searched for any sign of recent activity. Near the cave's mouth, they found remnants of campfires, tools and fragments of fabric, evidence that someone had been there, possibly recently. The discovery suggested that Rebecca had come to this place, drawn by the same curiosity and determination that had defined her. The thought stirred a mix of hope and sorrow. Hope that Rebecca had not given up, sorrow that she might have been closer than anyone realized. That night, Caldwell reviewed the evidence with Evelyn and Michael Carson. They discussed the possibility that the forest and its history held the key not only to the past disappearances, but also to Rebecca's fate. The notion was unsettling, that a cycle of fear and silence had persisted, untouched by time, shaping the lives of those who lived under the shadow of the mountains. For the people of Willow Creek, this was more than a mystery, it was a reckoning. As days passed, search efforts focused increasingly on the cave and surrounding areas. Volunteers and deputies combed the forest with renewed purpose, mindful of the stories and warnings, but driven by the desire to bring Rebecca home. One afternoon, David Harper received a call that changed everything. A local hiker had found something, a small weathered box, partially buried near the cave's entrance. Inside were personal belongings, a locket with Rebecca's initials, fragments of her notebook, and a single folded photograph. The photograph was faded but unmistakable. It showed Rebecca standing with several figures, their faces shadowed but their posture protective rather than threatening. The image was a haunting reminder of the complexity of her journey, of the connections she had made, and the courage she had shown. At the Harper cabin, May clutched the photograph with trembling hands, tears tracing quiet paths down her cheeks. "This is her story," she whispered. Not just the fear, but the love she carried. Sheriff Caldwell, holding the box in his hands, felt the weight of responsibility deepen. The investigation was no longer just about finding Rebecca, it was about understanding what had brought her into the heart of this darkness. That night, the town held a vigil. The flicker of hundreds of candles illuminated the faces of those who had come to remember Rebecca, to honor her spirit, and to hold on to hope. Laura Mills spoke softly, her voice carrying over the gathering. Rebecca sought the truth, even when it was frightening. She taught us that sometimes, the greatest bravery is in facing the unknown. As the flames danced and the night settled, Willow Creek felt the fragile threads of its community woven tighter, by grief, by hope, and by the enduring quest for light. Sheriff Caldwell knew the search was far from over. The forest held its secrets still, and the questions lingered like the mist that clung to the mountains each dawn. But in that vigil, in that shared silence, the town took a step toward healing, honoring Rebecca Harper not just as a missing person, but as a young woman whose courage had touched them all.
In the early hours of a cold November morning in 1992, the small town of Millfield, Ohio, lay quiet beneath a blanket of frost. The air was crisp and still, broken only by the occasional rustle of wind through the skeletal branches of trees lining the narrow streets. The town's usual hum, children getting ready for school, shopkeepers preparing for the day, had yet to begin. But something unseen and deeply unsettling was about to disrupt this calm. At the heart of Millfield lived the Harris family. Gregory Harris was a 38-year-old mechanic, known around town for his quiet demeanor and steady work ethic. His wife Linda, 35, was a school teacher beloved by her students and colleagues alike. Together they had two children, 12-year-old Megan and 9-year-old Joshua. Their home was a modest two-story house on Elm Street, filled with the familiar sounds of daily life and the warmth of family routines. That morning, Linda awoke early to prepare breakfast before sending the children off to school. She noticed immediately that something was off. Gregory, who usually rose before dawn to open the garage, was nowhere to be found. His truck was parked outside the house, but there was no sign of him inside. Concerned but trying to keep calm, Linda called out his name, receiving no answer. The stillness felt heavier than usual, and an unshakable feeling of unease settled in her chest. She checked the garage, but it was empty except for the tools and the lingering smell of motor oil. Outside, the street remained quiet, the world seemingly holding its breath. By mid-morning, the absence of Gregory was becoming impossible to ignore. Linda contacted a close friend, Carol Simmons, who agreed to help search the nearby areas. They walked the neighborhood, calling his name, checking places Gregory might have gone, the local diner, the mechanic shop where he sometimes helped a friend, even the small park where he often took the kids. No one had seen him. At the Millfield Police Department, Officer James Mitchell took the initial report. Gregory Harris was described as reliable and reserved, without known enemies or reasons to vanish. His disappearance was baffling, and the lack of clues raised troubling questions. Over the next few days, the search intensified. Volunteers combed the nearby woods and fields. Flyers bearing Gregory's picture were posted throughout the town and neighboring areas. Linda and the children clung to hope, though each passing hour tightened the knot of fear in their hearts. Detective Sarah Collins was assigned to the case. A seasoned investigator with a reputation for methodical work and empathy, she approached the case with a quiet determination. She understood the ripple effect such disappearances had on families and communities, the way normal life could fracture under the weight of uncertainty. Sarah began by interviewing those closest to Gregory. Friends spoke of his kindness and steady presence. Neighbors described a man who kept to himself, but was always willing to lend a hand. No one could recall any recent conflicts or odd behavior, yet beneath the surface, subtle tensions emerged. Some spoke of Gregory's recent struggles at the garage, financial difficulties that weighed heavily on him. Others mentioned a series of late-night phone calls he seemed reluctant to discuss. One name surfaced repeatedly: Mark Dalton, a local businessman with a reputation for aggressive tactics and questionable dealings. Gregory had recently argued with Mark over unpaid debts and a broken agreement involving car parts. Detective Collins knew this angle needed careful pursuit. But the mystery deepened when, during a search of Gregory's workshop, a small locked box was found hidden beneath a loose floorboard. Inside were letters, some old, some recent, addressed to Gregory from an anonymous sender. The letters hinted at secrets, threats veiled in cryptic language, and references to a truth that must be kept. The chilling tone of the correspondence unsettled Sarah. Was Gregory involved in something dangerous, or was someone trying to frighten him into silence? As the investigation unfolded, the community grappled with a growing fear. The disappearance of Gregory Harris was not just a missing person case, it was a crack in the town's calm facade, a window into shadows that had long lingered in the corners. The Harris family faced an unthinkable void. Megan, too young to fully grasp the situation, waited at the bus stop each morning hoping to see her father's familiar figure. Joshua clung to his mother, sensing her quiet despair but unable to voice the questions swirling in his mind. Linda kept a journal, pouring her thoughts and fears onto the pages. Each entry was a mixture of hope and heartbreak, a testament to a mother's love and the fragile thread of faith that kept her moving forward. Meanwhile, Detective Collins continued to peel back the layers of the case, tracing connections and examining every lead. The anonymous letters suggested a story more complex than a simple disappearance,
a narrative woven with danger, loyalty, and perhaps betrayal. One particularly foggy evening, a breakthrough came. A call from a local farmer led police to an abandoned barn on the outskirts of Millfield. Inside, they found traces of recent activity: a worn jacket, footprints in the dust, and a hastily discarded cell phone. The evidence hinted that Gregory had been there, but where was he now? The barn, dark and silent, became a symbol of the growing mystery that had gripped the town. As days turned to weeks, the case remained unresolved. The shadow over Millfield deepened, casting a long, quiet darkness over its people. And in the stillness of the night, the question lingered: what had happened to Gregory Harris, and could the truth ever be uncovered? The days following the discovery of the abandoned barn were marked by a tentative hope, fragile and uncertain like the morning mist that clung to the fields surrounding Millfield. The jacket found inside was worn and familiar. It belonged to Gregory Harris. The footprints confirmed his presence, and the cell phone, though damaged, offered a sliver of a lead. Yet despite the breakthrough, the question remained unanswered: where was Gregory now? Detective Sarah Collins returned to the barn early the next morning, accompanied by forensic specialists. The dim light filtered through the gaps in the barn's weathered wood, casting long wavering shadows across the dusty floor. They moved carefully, knowing that any overlooked detail could be crucial. The worn jacket hung on a broken nail near the barn door, stained with dirt and faint traces of dried grass. The cell phone, however, was more intriguing. Its screen was cracked and mostly unresponsive, but after hours of painstaking work by the department's cyber team, fragments of data were recovered. A few recent calls and text messages offered a glimpse into Gregory's final days before he vanished. One contact appeared repeatedly, a name Sarah hadn't encountered before. The messages were brief, cryptic, and laced with urgency. "Meet me," one text read. "Don't trust anyone," another warned. "They're watching." The ambiguity was maddening, but it suggested that Gregory had been caught in a web of secrecy and fear. Back at the police station, Sarah laid out the findings for Linda Harris and her children. Linda's face was pale, etched with exhaustion and worry. She clutched Megan's hand tightly, while Joshua stood close, his small fingers intertwined with his sister's. "I don't know who it is," Linda said quietly. "Gregory never mentioned anyone like that." Sarah nodded. "We're doing everything we can to find out. But we need to understand what Gregory was facing in those last days." The investigation broadened, tracing Gregory's recent movements and contacts with greater intensity. Detective Collins revisited the people who had known him well, friends, co-workers, neighbors, asking questions that dug beneath polite facades. A pattern began to emerge. Gregory had been unsettled in the weeks before his disappearance. His demeanor had shifted from quiet confidence to guarded caution. Several people recalled seeing him in heated conversations, sometimes alone, sometimes with a few others whose identities remained unclear. Among them was Harold Jenkins, a fellow mechanic and longtime friend of Gregory's. He told Sarah about an incident in late October, just days before Gregory vanished. He got a call, stepped outside, looked real shaken. When he came back in, he told me he'd been threatened. Said it wasn't just about money, it was something bigger, something he couldn't explain. Harold's words echoed the tone of the anonymous letters found in the locked box. "Did he say who threatened him?" Sarah asked. "No," Harold replied. "Just warned me to be careful." The weight of unspoken fears settled heavily in the room. Sarah and her team started focusing on Mark Dalton, the businessman with the aggressive reputation. Dalton's dealings were a tangled web of loans, unpaid debts, and shady contracts. He owned several properties in town, and had been known to pressure people into compliance through intimidation. Detectives obtained a warrant to search Dalton's office and residence. The search yielded several documents, contracts, financial records, and a series of letters that suggested a possible connection to Gregory's financial troubles. More alarmingly, there were references to a secretive operation and a series of code words that hinted at illegal activities. The documents spoke in veiled language about shipments, packages and disposals, terms that raised red flags. Dalton was brought in for questioning. He maintained a calm, measured demeanor, denying any involvement in Gregory's disappearance. "I don't know where he is," Dalton said evenly. "And I certainly don't know anything about any operation you're talking about." But his answers felt rehearsed, evasive. His eyes, cold and calculating, revealed little. Meanwhile, the anonymous letters in Gregory's locked box became a key piece of the puzzle. Sarah enlisted the help of a handwriting analyst, who examined the style and phrasing. The letters appeared to come from someone familiar with Gregory's life and secrets, someone close enough to warn him, yet intent on instilling fear. One letter was particularly chilling. "Your search for the truth will cost more than you realize. The past is never buried here. Leave before it's too late." The mention of the past stirred Sarah's curiosity. What history was lurking beneath Millfield's quiet surface? Digging into local archives, Sarah discovered reports of several disappearances dating back decades, many of which had never been solved. Men and women had vanished without a trace, their stories fading into whispers and rumors. Some locals spoke of a curse on the land, others blamed organized crime, but no one had ever found concrete answers. It became clear that Gregory's disappearance was not isolated. It was a continuation of something much older, a dark thread running through the town's history. Linda Harris found solace in small acts of remembrance. She pinned the flyers with Gregory's face on the refrigerator, played his favorite songs softly for the children, and kept his workshop tidy, hoping he might return to find it as he left it. Megan began writing letters to her father, folding them carefully, and placing them in a small box by her bedside. "Dear Dad," she would start, her handwriting a mixture of childish hope and dawning fear. "I miss you every day. Please come home." Joshua often asked his mother if Daddy was coming back. Her answers were gentle, filled with quiet reassurance, even when she herself did not know. The community rallied around the family. Neighbors brought meals, friends offered to watch the children, and the local church held prayers for Gregory's safe return. Yet beneath the kindness, a tension simmered, the fear that the truth might be more terrible than anyone dared to imagine. One night, Sarah received a call from a man who identified himself as Leonard Price. He claimed to have information about Gregory, but insisted on anonymity. Their meeting was arranged in a secluded diner on the edge of town. Leonard was middle-aged, with a weathered face and eyes that seemed to carry the weight of many secrets. He spoke carefully, his voice low. "There's a network operating in Millfield," he said. "Not just business dealings, but something darker. People have disappeared before, not just Gregory. They keep the town silent, make sure no one asks too many questions." Sarah listened intently, as Leonard described a pattern of intimidation, threats and violence disguised as accidents or unexplained absences. He mentioned names, some known, others whispered in fear. "They watch," Leonard said, "and they don't hesitate." The meeting left Sarah with a renewed sense of urgency. The danger was real, and the stakes higher than she had imagined. Back at the station, she reviewed the evidence again, searching for links between Dalton, Leonard's claims, and the shadowy figures that haunted the edges of Millfield's life. Meanwhile, Linda noticed changes in Megan and Joshua. The children were quieter, more withdrawn. Megan's schoolwork suffered as her mind seemed elsewhere, lost in the unspoken absence of her father. Linda worried about how to protect them from a pain too large for their young hearts. One afternoon, as Linda walked through the neighborhood, she noticed a car parked a little too long near the Harris home. Its dark windows and unfamiliar license plate set her nerves on edge. She called Sarah, who promised to send an officer to check. The presence of strangers, the whispers of secrets, and the looming silence of the missing man pressed down on Millfield like a slow, unrelenting tide. The search for Gregory was no longer just a matter of finding one man. It was a confrontation with the shadows that had long settled over the town, a challenge to uncover what had been buried beneath decades of silence. The deeper Sarah delved, the clearer it became that the answers would not come easily or quickly. Each clue was a dawn, each discovery a fragment of a story woven with fear and loyalty, love and betrayal. And for the Harris family, every day without Gregory was a quiet agony, a space filled with hope, dread and the aching need to know. As autumn deepened into winter, Millfield braced itself for what lay ahead, the chill in the air a reflection of the cold truth waiting to be revealed. The passing weeks carved deeper grooves of worry into the lives of the Harris family, and the community that surrounded them. Millfield streets wore a heavier silence, as if the town itself was holding its breath. The search for Gregory had become a somber rhythm, search parties, interviews, late-night vigils, and yet tangible answers remained elusive. Each day stretched longer than the last, and the sense of uncertainty gnawed at everyone who had known him. Detective Sarah Collins found herself grappling not only with the tangled threads of the case, but with the emotional toll it was taking on the Harris family. Linda, once composed and resolute, now carried a weariness that was impossible to hide. Her eyes, once bright with hope, were shadowed by sleepless nights and quiet fears. Megan and Joshua, too young to comprehend fully but wise beyond their years, grew quieter, their smiles more fleeting. One afternoon, Sarah sat with Linda in the small sunlit kitchen of the Harris home. The room was filled with the scent of brewing tea, and the faint hum of a radio playing soft melodies in the background. On the table lay a collection of photographs, family moments frozen in time, birthdays, vacations, lazy Sunday afternoons. Each picture was a testament to what had been, and what might never be again. "I want to believe he's coming back," Linda said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "But some nights, it feels like he's slipping further away." Sarah nodded, offering a silent reassurance. "We're not giving up. Every lead, every clue, it all brings us closer." Linda looked up, eyes searching. "Do you really think we'll find him?" "That's what I'm fighting for," Sarah replied. "For you, for Megan and Joshua, and for Gregory." The detective left the house later that day with a renewed determination. The case was no longer just a professional challenge, it had become deeply personal. She pored over evidence again, seeking patterns in the chaos. Among the recovered phone data and the anonymous letters, a new lead emerged, an unregistered phone number that had exchanged messages with Gregory in the days before his disappearance. Tracing the number was difficult. It was registered through multiple layers of anonymizing services, but through patient investigation, Sarah's team identified the owner, a woman named Lisa Monroe, a reclusive figure with ties to a network of small businesses and underground dealings in the region. Sarah arranged to meet Lisa, hoping to uncover what she knew of Gregory's final days. The meeting took place in a modest cafe on the outskirts of Millfield, a quiet spot where conversations could remain discreet. Lisa arrived quietly, her appearance unassuming, dark hair pulled back, eyes wary but intelligent. She sat across from Sarah, hands folded on the table. "I knew Gregory," Lisa began, voice steady. "We crossed paths a few times. He was cautious, nervous in the last weeks. Something was wrong." Sarah listened as Lisa revealed a side of Gregory few had seen. He had confided fears about people he couldn't trust, about being watched, about secrets he wished he could escape. Lisa spoke of an event, a meeting Gregory had hinted at but never fully explained, a confrontation that had scared him deeply. "Did he say who he was meeting?" Sarah asked gently. Lisa shook her head. "No, but he said it was important, that it might change everything." The conversation ended with no clear answers, but Sarah knew Lisa's testimony was crucial. It confirmed that Gregory's disappearance was tied to something larger and more dangerous than mere financial troubles. Back in Millfield, the tension was palpable. Linda struggled to keep the household steady, balancing her grief with the needs of her children. Megan's grades slipped, and she withdrew from friends, spending more time alone, writing letters to her father that she kept secret. Joshua, still too young to understand fully, clung to his mother's side, sensing the absence in ways he could not express. The community's support remained steadfast, but beneath the surface, fear lingered. Some neighbors spoke in hushed tones about the dangers hidden in plain sight, the influence of powerful people, the secrets that no one dared to expose. Detective Collins pressed forward, focusing on the connections between Gregory, Mark Dalton, and the broader shadowy network hinted at by Leonard Price. Dalton, despite police scrutiny, maintained a facade of innocence. His public image as a successful businessman clashed with the whispers that surrounded him. But as Sarah dug deeper, evidence began to accumulate: financial records showing unexplained transactions, surveillance footage placing Dalton's associates near key locations, and witness accounts describing clandestine meetings after dark. The investigation also uncovered disturbing ties between Dalton's business ventures and a series of missing persons cases that spanned several years. Many of the victims had been linked to Dalton's properties or employees, people who had disappeared without explanation, their absences accepted as unfortunate but unsolvable mysteries. Sarah felt the weight of this revelation keenly. The pattern suggested a deliberate, systematic silencing of those who threatened to reveal too much. One particularly chilling discovery came from a local historian who had catalogued Millfield's unsolved disappearances. According to old records, a similar pattern had emerged decades earlier, during a time when the town was undergoing rapid industrial change. Several factory workers vanished, rumors of corruption and cover-ups circulated, but no one dared to speak openly. The past and present converged in a haunting reflection of a community haunted by its secrets. One evening, as Sarah reviewed these findings in her office, a sudden call jolted her from concentration. It was Leonard Price, the anonymous informant. "I have something for you," he said. "Meet me at the old mill tonight." The old mill was a relic on the edge of town, long abandoned and shrouded in decay. Its skeletal frame loomed like a ghost, a symbol of forgotten times and buried truths. Sarah arrived under a pale moon, the cold biting through her coat. Leonard was waiting, his face tense. He handed her a small battered notebook filled with handwritten notes, names, dates, and cryptic references. The notebook belonged to a man named William Harper, a former employee of Dalton's Enterprises who had vanished years before. The entries detailed illegal shipments, threats, and a coded system for identifying people who were disposable. Leonard's voice trembled. Harper tried to expose them. That's why he disappeared. Sarah's heart pounded. This was a critical piece of the puzzle, evidence of a ruthless operation with deep roots. She promised Leonard protection and intensified the investigation, but danger was closing in. That same night, back at the Harris home, Linda heard the sound of footsteps outside. She peeked through the curtains and saw a shadowy figure retreating into the night. Her breath caught in her throat, the familiar terror returning. She called Sarah, who immediately dispatched officers to patrol the area. The presence of strangers, the whispered threats, and the growing web of mystery left the family on edge. Megan, sensing the fear around her, confided in her mother one night, "Mom, what if Dad doesn't want to come back?" Linda's heart broke at the question. She pulled Megan close, holding her as she whispered, "We don't know that. We have to believe he will." The weight of hope and despair pressed on them all. Meanwhile, Detective Collins worked tirelessly, piecing together the threads that bound Gregory's disappearance to a larger, more sinister force. The notebook from William Harper became central to the case. It revealed names of individuals connected to the operation, including a list of properties and dates correlating with known disappearances. Sarah coordinated with state authorities, expanding the scope of the investigation. In one late-night session, she examined the notebook alongside financial records and police reports. A chilling pattern emerged, a cycle of intimidation, silence and erasure. The victims were not random, but carefully selected, people who had uncovered truths or posed threats. The operation was ruthless and calculated, its reach extending beyond Millfield's borders. As winter deepened, the town's landscape changed. Snow blanketed the fields, muffling sound and light. The cold seeped into bones and hearts alike. Linda found herself walking the neighborhood at dusk, clutching a small photo of Gregory. Each step was heavy with memory and longing. At school, Megan's teacher noticed her fading presence and gently encouraged her to speak. Megan shared fragments of her pain, her fear that her father might never return. The school counselor reached out to Linda, offering support and resources for the family. Through it all, the Harris family's resilience shone quietly, a testament to love amid uncertainty. Detective Collins, aware of the mounting danger, took precautions. She requested additional protection for the family and arranged surveillance on known suspects. Despite the risks, Sarah refused to relent. One morning, a breakthrough came when a tip led officers to a secluded cabin several miles outside town. The property was owned by an associate of Mark Dalton, and the search revealed signs of recent occupancy. Inside, investigators found personal items belonging to Gregory Harris, a jacket, a worn photograph of his family, and a notebook with scribbled notes. There were also unsettling signs of struggle, broken furniture, scuffed floors, and a faint scent of chemicals. But Gregory himself was nowhere to be found. The cabin became a grim waypoint in the search, a silent witness to a chapter of the story still unfolding. Back in Millfield, Linda clung to hope while wrestling with despair. She lit a candle every evening, placing it in the window as a beacon for her lost husband. Megan and Joshua joined her, their small hands resting on the windowsill, eyes searching the dark horizon. The mystery remained unsolved, but the bonds of family and community endured. Detective Collins prepared for what she knew would be a difficult confrontation. The shadows that enveloped Millfield were deep, and the truths they concealed were dangerous. But she was committed to uncovering them, for Gregory, for the Harris family, and for the town that deserved peace. As the night grew quiet, and snow settled softly on the ground, the story pressed on, an echo of lives intertwined with secrets, loss, and the unyielding hope for justice. The days that followed the discovery of the cabin's grim remnants became a turning point in the investigation. The small belongings of Gregory Harris found there, the jacket, the photograph, the battered notebook, felt like whispers from a world just beyond reach. Each item was a fragment of a life suspended in uncertainty, a life that seemed to hang in the balance between hope and despair. Detective Sarah Collins returned to the Harris home with a heaviness she could scarcely shake. She found Linda sitting quietly at the kitchen table, staring at the photograph of Gregory that had become a sacred talisman in the household. Megan and Joshua sat nearby, each absorbed in their own silent worlds. "I found these at the cabin," Sarah said softly, placing the jacket and notebook on the table. "It's clear Gregory was there recently. We don't know what happened after, but we're closer now." Linda reached out, touching the jacket's worn fabric as if it might somehow carry the warmth of her husband's presence. Her eyes glistened with tears, but there was also a flicker of something else, something fierce and unyielding. "We'll find him," Linda said, voice steady. "We have to." Sarah nodded, feeling the weight of the promise she carried. The investigation intensified. Forensic teams examined the cabin, searching for trace evidence, fibers, fingerprints, anything that might reveal who had been there, and what had transpired. Detectives combed through financial records, communications and surveillance footage with renewed urgency. Mark Dalton, the man whose name had shadowed the investigation from the beginning, remained elusive. Publicly, he continued to maintain a polished image, attending charity events, making speeches about community progress, projecting an air of normalcy. But behind closed doors, the pressure was mounting. Legal teams worked frantically to manage the growing web of accusations and evidence. Sarah knew that to reach the heart of this darkness, she needed more than facts and figures. She needed to understand the man behind the mask, the man who had woven a network of fear and control so tightly that even those who worked for him hesitated to speak. Interviews with Dalton's employees revealed a culture of intimidation, whispers of threats, of disappearances thinly veiled as accidents or business failures, painted a chilling picture. People who had once admired Dalton now looked at him with quiet dread. Among the most revealing moments in the investigation came from a man named Tom Bradley, a former security guard for Dalton's enterprises. Bradley had resigned months before Gregory's disappearance, citing ethical concerns, though he had kept his reasons private. In a discreet meeting with Sarah, Tom spoke carefully, eyes darting to the door, as if expecting someone to burst in at any moment. There was talk, things you don't want to hear, he said, about people who got in the way, people who knew too much. He described a system designed to silence, whether through fear, manipulation or worse. When Gregory started poking around, asking questions, it put him on a list. They don't just lose people, they make sure they never come back. Sarah felt a cold shiver run down her spine. The truth was darker than she had feared. Yet despite the looming menace, the case was far from closed. A breakthrough arrived in the form of a digital clue hidden deep within Gregory's recovered notebook. Among the scribbled notes was a sequence of numbers and letters, encrypted, fragmented, but unmistakably a code. Working with cybercrime specialists, Sarah's team cracked the code, revealing GPS coordinates to a remote location miles outside Millfield. The spot was near a dense forest, long known to locals as a place where few ventured.
On a chilly morning, Sarah, alongside a team of officers and search and rescue volunteers, set out to investigate. The forest was thick with ancient trees, their branches reaching skyward like silent sentinels. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth. As the group moved deeper into the woods, the only sounds were the crunch of footsteps and the occasional call of distant birds. After several hours, they came upon a clearing. There, partially hidden beneath a tarp and covered in brush, was an old hunting cabin, smaller and more weathered than the one found earlier. Inside, the searchers found signs that someone had been living there recently. A makeshift bed, scattered belongings, and a small stash of food supplies painted a picture of a life on the run. Most startling of all was a worn journal, its pages filled with Gregory's handwriting. Sarah carefully opened the journal, her eyes scanning the entries. The pages revealed a man trapped in a nightmare, aware of the dangers closing in, struggling to protect his family even from a distance. He wrote of fear, hope, and determination, of plans to expose those who threatened him. One passage stood out. "They think they've silenced me, but I'm still here. I'll find a way back to Linda and the children. I have to." The discovery was both a relief and a heartbreak. Gregory was alive, but trapped in a perilous situation. Back in town, Linda received the news with a mix of joy and renewed anxiety. Hope blossomed, fragile and tentative, but undeniable. The community rallied once more, organizing support and offering prayers for Gregory's safe return. Days turned into weeks as the investigation focused on uncovering how to reach him, how to dismantle the network that held him captive. Sarah reached out to Leonard Price, the informant who had risked so much to help. Together, they coordinated efforts to gather more intelligence. The operation was delicate. One misstep could endanger Gregory's life. Meanwhile, Megan found a quiet strength emerging. Inspired by her father's courage, she began writing essays and poems about truth and justice. Her words, though young, carried a wisdom beyond her years. Joshua, too, grew closer to his mother, sensing the weight she carried and offering comfort in small gestures, a hand held, a whispered, "I love you." As winter faded into spring, the long night slowly yielded to dawn. One evening, a call came through to the Harris home. It was Sarah. "We have a chance," she said. "Gregory's location has been confirmed. We're planning a rescue." Linda's hands trembled as she clutched the phone. Megan and Joshua gathered around, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of the kitchen light. The rescue was planned for the early hours, under the cover of darkness. Sarah's team moved with precision and caution, aware that the shadows still held danger. They approached the cabin in the forest, guided by the coordinates and the hope that had sustained them all. Inside, Gregory was weak but alive. The months in hiding had taken their toll, but his spirit remained unbroken. When he saw the officers, tears welled in his eyes. The first words he spoke were for his family. "I'm coming home," he whispered. The journey back to Millfield was quiet and contemplative. Gregory, wrapped in a warm coat, looked out the window as the landscape passed by, fields, trees, the edges of the town he had missed so deeply. At the hospital, he was treated for exhaustion and malnutrition, but the medical team expressed cautious optimism. Linda,
Megan and Joshua were there, waiting. When Gregory was finally wheeled into the room, their reunion was silent but profound, a moment of raw emotion, of love and relief that words could scarcely capture. In the days that followed, the Harris family began the slow process of healing. Therapy sessions, family counseling and the steadfast support of friends and neighbors created a foundation for recovery. Gregory shared what he could about his captivity, fragments of fear, moments of hope, and the constant struggle to stay alive and protect those he loved. The investigation into Mark Dalton and his associates continued with renewed vigor. The evidence gathered was substantial enough to bring charges. The town watched as the wheels of justice began to turn, hoping for accountability and closure. But the scars left by months of uncertainty and trauma were deep. Linda spoke openly about the challenges of rebuilding trust and safety, both for herself and her children. Megan's writing blossomed into advocacy, her voice joining those who called for change and transparency. Joshua's laughter returned slowly, carried on the wings of small moments of joy. Detective Sarah Collins, reflecting on the journey, understood that justice was not a destination but an ongoing path. The Harris family's story was one of resilience amid darkness, a reminder that even in the face of profound loss, hope can endure. As spring unfurled its colors over Millfield, the town breathed a tentative sigh of relief. The mystery that had gripped them was not fully behind them. Some questions remained unanswered, some wounds still raw, but the light that returned to the Harris home was a testament to the enduring power of love, courage, and the human spirit.